Did you know there was a Kirby manga? Actually, there's multiple. Back in 1995, there was a Kirby manga called Kirby of the Stars, The Story of Dedede Who Lives in Poo Poo Poo, created by Hirokazu Hikawa. Hikawa was best known for penning this manga, as well as a manga adaptation of Hudson Soft's Bonk series. This manga series was serialized exclusively in Japan in Koro Koro Comic Magazine. This manga ran for over 10 years, amassing over 26 volumes. Unfortunately, there is no real translation I could find of this manga, so instead, I have to settle for the next best thing. In 2018, Hikawa decided to compile a sort of best-of compilation of the best stories this manga has to offer. This would come to be translated and released in the Americas in 2021, known as Kirby Manga Mania. I have obtained all 6 current volumes of the manga, and we will be reviewing every chapter within. I apologize in advance if the quality of the images is a bit weird. There's no good scans of this manga online, so I had to scan it myself, and I am definitely not a professional. Let's get right into it. But before we do, did you know that we have a merch store where you can buy our shirts, mugs, and stickers? Get them now to enrich your gameplay experience. Anyway, to the review. First up is Volume 1, Chapter 1, Kirby the Loopy Picnic Crasher. King Dedede throws a picnic for himself and all of his friends so that they can watch the cherry blossoms. King Dedede makes sure to ask Poppy Bros Jr. to make sure that no one invited Kirby, since he ruined the last year's picnic by eating everything. Unbeknownst to Dedede, Kirby and Chirby are sleeping in the tree right above their picnic. Kirby notices and starts inhaling all of the food. Kirby begs King Dedede to let him join the picnic, but King Dedede agrees if Kirby uses his stone ability to hold down the picnic blanket the whole time. Kirby ends up hitting Dedede in the face with his stone ability as King Dedede throws an assortment of things at Kirby to get him to leave. One of these was a bottle of what is called Loopy Juice. Kirby gets drunk. Loopy, and starts going on a rampage. He eats all of his friends, tries to rant about life to Dedede over and over and over, sings horrible karaoke, all ending in a talent show which causes Kirby to inhale everybody other than Dedede to show off his 10-copy ability Quick Change Act. Kirby starts crying because no one saw his act, so King Dedede gives him a lollipop to shut him up, not realizing candy makes Kirby invincible. In his craze, Kirby ends up destroying all of the cherry blossom trees that King Dedede wanted to watch. Kirby finally conks himself out as Chirby and Squishy crawl out of Kirby's mouth. Ew. They wake Kirby up, and Kirby is finally sober and realizes that he ruined the picnic. Feeling bad for King Dedede, Kirby inhales a cherry blossom tree to become the new View. You know, going from how Kirby is characterized in most Kirby media, especially Kirby Right Back At Ya, this is such a whiplash. I know I'm just going to have to get used to it because this is an entirely different version of what Kirby is. As for this first chapter, I can't believe Kirby got drunk. I'm not gonna lie, Kirby was a bit much in this chapter. I don't know if the zaniness of this manga is always that much or if it was ramped up because he was drunk, but it seemed like a lot. Also, get used to there being cursed art in this manga. Flipping ahead, it seems like there's a lot of those. At least Kirby seems like he's not that annoying of a guy in the end, becoming the cherry blossom tree that Dedede wanted to see. With all of that in mind, Volume 1, Chapter 1 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 1, Chapter 2, King Dedede Magically Turned Into a Toy. The chapter begins with a lonely, cold, raggedy peasant walking up to King Dedede's castle. They say they've lost their way and they would appreciate some shelter. King Dedede just hurls insults at him. Turns out this man is actually a powerful wizard and, as punishment for his rudeness, Samir transforms King Dedede into a toy. Samir tells King Dedede that he must experience true kindness before all of the leaves fall off of Wispy, or else he will be an ugly toy forever. That's right, it's Beauty and the Beast. Word gets around about King Dedede's transformation and every denizen in Dreamland wants to see him. At first, King Dedede does a quick circle walking in and out of the castle, but then becomes everyone's plaything to laugh and gawk at. Soon enough though, everyone gets bored of King Dedede and decides to move on. King Dedede starts to feel despair as everyone in Dreamland couldn't show him true kindness. He goes to his last resort, Kirby. Kirby sees Dedede and starts treating him like a teddy bear, playing all sorts of games with him and tucking him into bed. During the night, Dedede gets kicked by Kirby. creating one of the most hilarious panels ever. Getting shocked by Kirby's sleep copy abilities and having to withstand Kirby's sleep singing, King Dedede gets fed up and goes to whack Kirby awake, but after seeing how softly he's sleeping, he decides to leave him alone and tuck him in. This act of kindness breaks the spell, turning King Dedede back to normal. The king gets excited and decides to wake Kirby up to show him, but Kirby pulls a Kenshiro and beats the crap out of the king in his tired state, ending the chapter. Now that I'm more used to the vibe of this manga, I can definitely say that I'm starting to like it. There were some genuinely good laughs in this one, like when Kirby kicks King Dedede in his sleep. Hell, Kirby's face when he's woken up is priceless. I'm making that a reaction photo. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 2 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 3. Typhoon Kirby makes landfall in Dreamland. The chapter begins with King Dedede and all of his subjects preparing Castle Dedede by boarding it up. Kirby hears the sound of the hammering and mistakes it for drums and starts partying. King Dedede shouts at Kirby that there is no party. They are preparing for the typhoon of the century. King Dedede starts taunting Kirby, saying that Castle Dedede will do way better in the typhoon than Kirby's house. Kirby goes home to make sure it's secure when he realizes it's able to move just from the force of his blowing. Kirby gets the bright idea to put his house inside of Castle Dedede in order to protect it. Of course, he does it in the most Kirby way possible and breaks a giant hole through Dedede's wall in order to get it there. Kirby decides to help patch the hole in the wall, but ends up just using the castle subjects to do it. Poppy then recruits Kirby to help him board up stuff around the castle to keep it reinforced. Kirby, of course, goes too far and boards up the bathroom. When King Dedede forces his way into the bathroom, he discovers Kirby reinforced the toilet too. As Dedede yells at him, Kirby decides to reinforce Dedede's mouth as well. Kirby decides to stress test the stuff by using his inhale ability, but it causes most of the castle to come crumbling down. Kirby asks how else he could prepare for a typhoon, as Chef Kawasaki says that you must stock up on food and water. Kirby then immediately eats a week's worth of food in an instant. Kirby's also told about safety equipment and decides to test out the hard hats by putting it on Dedede and using his fire ability. The hat definitely stayed intact. Dedede, on the other hand, did not. After all of this hijinks, the typhoon is about to hit Dreamland, and the castle is in no state to withstand it thanks to Kirby. Poppy suggests evacuating, but King Dedede is too prideful to not go down with his castle. Kirby offers to build him a new house, but it ends up being a doghouse. As the typhoon wind starts to hit, Kirby gets the idea to weigh down the castle, so he puts some giant boulders on the castle, making it almost get completely crushed and cave in. Kirby then decides to inhale everything in Dreamland that could possibly fly into the castle during the typhoon. Now that everything is destroyed, Kirby is just about ready for the typhoon. Walkie ends up coming on the news with a weather update, stating that the typhoon made an unexpected turn and will be missing Dreamland completely. Disappointed, Kirby decides to fly him and his house home. King Dedede wants revenge for all of the pain, suffering, and damage he's caused, so he starts beating the crap out of him with his hammer. Kirby starts to feel sick and ends up throwing up every single thing he inhaled all over Castle Dedede, reducing it to a pile of rubble. Kirby offers to help, but Dedede shouts at him that he's done enough. God, this chapter was so fast-paced. Literally every couple of panels was a joke. It was hard to describe the chapter considering just how much was happening. Either way though, this is definitely a pretty funny chapter. The gag with Kirby reinforcing the bathroom and then the toilet actually got a chuckle out of me. The only thing I must point out is that Kirby is just kinda annoying. I get it's a gag manga and Kirby is written to be obliviously stupid, but this one is just going way too far. If you didn't see the panels and were just listening to what I was describing, you would just think that Kirby is just being malicious with how much he destroys in this chapter. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 3 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 4, Body Double Kapar, Protect King Dedede. The chapter starts with Poppy walking in on King Dedede crying at the TV. At first he thinks he's watching historical drama, but he's actually watching tapes of all of the times Kirby has beaten him. Who fucking filmed that? King Dedede wallows in all of the times he's gotten hurt and determines no more. King Dedede has heard that in times of war, kings of nations would have body doubles take their place. King Dedede has enlisted Kapar to be his body double, to go out with Kirby and get beaten for him. Poppy doesn't think Kapar looks anything like the king, but the king sees that as a bit of nonsense. Kirby and Gooey show up to invite King Dedede to play tennis, and Kapar goes out in his stead. King Dedede and Poppy decide to follow them to see how Kapar does. Kirby, Gooey, and Kapar meet up with Rick, Ku, Kine, Nago, Pitch, and ChuChu, and the animal friends start to get suspicious of Kapar, but he does this to convince them. He's the real deal. As Kapar starts playing against Kirby, he starts losing and Kirby gets cocky. King Dedede gets upset, thinking he'd do better than that. He then trades places with Kapar and actually plays. King Dedede ends up hitting Kirby in the head with a tennis ball, making Kirby lose his temper. He spits a bunch of tennis balls, a bunch of rocks, and a bunch of bombs at the king. Kirby goes to apologize for losing himself, but Kapar takes his place without a scratch on him. The group deems tennis too dangerous and decides to move on to snack time. When they start cooking up potatoes, King Dedede once again switches place with Kapar. King Dedede ends up eating a raw potato, so Kirby decides to help him out by cooking the food in Dedede's mouth. I give this manga an A+ in creativity. Kapar takes his place again and eats Dedede's potato. King Dedede gets upset with how things have been going and decides to call the whole thing off. Kapar says that he doesn't want to switch anymore and uses his cutter ability to cut off the king's face and his own face and do a face-off situation. Both of the Dededes run out claiming that they're the real Dedede. Kirby then determines which one is the real one by hitting one with a hammer. He determines the one with Kapar's face to be the true Dedede. Ku states it's because he is so used to getting whacked by Kirby that he didn't even try to dodge. Kapar, seeing that the ruse is up, decides to switch faces back with the king. Dedede explains what his plan was, and Kirby suggests that they should switch places every once in a while. King Dedede, believing this to be a dream come true, agrees. We finally see Dedede win and beat Kirby, until we zoom out and see that Kirby and Dedede have switched faces, ending the chapter. So far I think this is my favorite chapter. I like that King Dedede's idiocy is what punishes him rather than just Kirby being a menace. I like that King Dedede's idiocy is what punishes him rather than just Kirby being a Dennis the Menace type. This is the first chapter where Kirby isn't that much of an eccentric destructive force, and I kinda like it. The only thing I wish was different was I wish the face switch between King Dedede and Kapar lasted just a tiny bit longer. It felt too fast. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 4 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 5. It's tough being honest. The chapter begins with Gooey sitting on King Dedede's head. The king asks Kirby to get Gooey off of him, but Kirby ends up just sitting on top of the king's head as well. They get so comfortable they both fall asleep. King Dedede gets super annoyed and decides to smash them with his hammer, only really hitting Gooey and himself. Gooey ends up passing out on King Dedede's head, making him stuck and not able to be pulled off. Through thinking of how much he hates Kirby, Gooey ends up saying exactly what King Dedede is thinking. This gets the king into a heap of trouble, tanking his reputation. This all comes to a head when Dark Matter Swordsman of all characters comes down from space and challenges King Dedede to a duel for the control of Dreamland. Kirby decides to put them through marriage counseling and making them talk it out instead of fighting. Of course, Gooey keeps blurting out every insulting thought King Dedede has about Dark Matter, causing Dark Matter to really want to fight him. Just as Dark Matter is about to attack, Gooey comes to and attacks him with his tongue, sending Dark Matter back to space. Gooey gets off of King Dedede's head, leading him back to a normal life. Kirby decides he wants to try and puts Gooey on his head. Gooey just says everything Kirby says, showing everyone that Kirby just says what he thinks, ending the chapter. Now that the chapters are a bit more mellow and slice of life, I'm really liking this. King Dedede just being such a pompous ass in his thoughts was pretty funny. Also, the appearance of Dark Matter was so unexpected and honestly, really cool. I hope we get other cool appearances of villains like these in the future. It was cool having Dark Matter being defeated by yet another form of Dark Matter. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 5 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 6, Spooky Tales. Welcome to Terror Inn. The chapter begins with Kirby, King Dedede, and Poppy traveling to a beach and checking into a hotel. The hotel is owned by Gabon, who checks them into a room. King Dedede and Poppy already get the creeps with this hotel, but Kirby of course is having a grand old time. King Dedede gets spooked by the view of the graveyard and the sounds coming from Kirby's stomach. Kirby decides to see how dinner is coming along, leaving King Dedede and Poppy alone in the room together. Kirby meets up with Gabon and sees the food he is about to serve. Kirby ends up gobbling it all up at once, including Gabon. Poppy gets suspicious of this and leaves to go check on Kirby. Poppy finds exactly what he expected, but Kirby whacks Poppy, begging him not to tell King Dedede. King Dedede gets scared that he's alone and is now hearing screaming and decides to go investigate. Kirby disguises himself as Gabon and serves the king a plate of bones. The skull falls off of Kirby, making King Dedede think that the owner of the hotel is a ghost. Noticing his bigger stature, King Dedede comes to the conclusion that Gabon ate Poppy and Kirby. Poppy comes to and gets his revenge by hitting Kirby. Kirby spits out Gabon and he runs into Dedede. Gabon tells him to give him back his skull, and King Dedede mistakes him for a faceless monster. The chapter ends with King Dedede being bedridden from how scared he got. This chapter kinda felt like half of a story. I feel like not a lot happened in this chapter for it to constitute a story. King Dedede just gets scared thanks to Kirby's hijinks, and then the chapter just ends. It seems too quick for its own good. There really weren't any standout jokes either. I don't think I can say I smiled even a single time while reading this chapter. For a gag manga, that's pretty bad. With all of that in mind, Volume 1, Chapter 6 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 1, Chapter 7, King Dedede's Robotic Pet Craze. The chapter begins with King Dedede very happily playing with his robotic pet, Furpy. Adeline, Ku, and Kirby are enjoying watching the king play with his cool new toy. King Dedede wants to show off that Furpy can dance when it hears music, so he goes inside of the castle to fetch his music player. Kirby decides that he doesn't want to wait and decides to sing in front of the Furpy, causing it to break into a million pieces. King Dedede comes back and wonders where Furpy is. Thinking fast, Kirby puts on a costume that makes him look like Furpy. Kirby starts acting as the robotic pet and is completely succeeding in tricking King Dedede. While he's distracted, Adeline runs off to try and buy a new Furpy. After a while of doing everything that Dedede wants and not being able to do what he wants, Kirby gets tired of doing this and runs away. King Dedede sees that his robotic pet is gone and starts panicking, putting out missing signs with a reward of 50 cents. Kirby, wanting to buy candy, finds himself and comes back to Dedede. Some of Dedede's subjects almost give up on the ruse, but Kirby spits out a bunch of missiles before they can. King Dedede gets impressed by the technology of his Furpy, and Adeline comes back with a new toy, but she was only able to find a knockoff brand. They switch Kirby with the new toy, and King Dedede sees through the ruse immediately. King Dedede finds Kirby and asks if he's seen Furpy around, and Kirby inadvertently reveals that he has the piece of Furpy with him. King Dedede figures it out and gets told everything. King Dedede decides he's gonna make Kirby pay by treating him like his pet, which just ends up biting the king in the ass when he has to keep feeding him 24/7. I like this chapter a lot too. I'm starting to really like this iteration of King Dedede, not just being an adult who acts like a spoiled child, but more so just the annoying kid in the friend group who loves to show off his toys. It's cool that everyone else is doing this just to spare King Dedede's feelings, and not for any malicious reason. I'm just thinking about how mean everyone in Kirby Right Back At You would be if they were put in this exact situation. Plus, Kirby keeping up the ruse was definitely entertaining to read. Not the funniest chapter, but not the least funny either. With all of that in mind, Volume 1, Chapter 7 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 1, Chapter 8, The Comforts of the 22nd Century. So this is more of a what-if scenario if the denizens of Dreamland lived in the 22nd century, or if you want to be cheeky, what if Haltman won? We begin the chapter with Dedede waking up in the morning with the most extra alarm system in the universe. Fucked up part is, that still wouldn't wake me up. King Dedede meets with Poppy and they talk until they get a delivery at the door. They open the box and they were delivered Kirby because, in the future, you can deliver people. Did you know that in the early days of the postal system, people used to mail their kids to family members? Just a little fun fact. Kirby demands breakfast and comes to see that the only thing you need to eat in the future is one pill that gives you all the nutrients you need for the day. Kirby, King Dedede, and Poppy decide to go for a walk, but the sidewalks are automatic, but it is very quickly turning into a board game. Kirby's cell phone starts to ring and we see just how tiny cell phones are in the future. Kirby drops it though and they start looking for it like it's a contact lens. It starts to rain, going against what the weather said, showing that not only has weather forecasting not advanced, it's actually gone backwards, being determined by the flip of a shoe. The rain clears up and the gang decides to get a drink, which has a variety of different temperatures like cold Dedede, body temp, and dog hot. The gang then go into an arcade to play a realistic fighting game, but all it is just a place to fight where there's virtual health bars above your head. They decide to take a shower, but showers in the future are just washing machines. King Dedede decides he wants to go home, but his automatic security system won't let him in because the king looks slightly different from his picture. This is the end of the chapter. Another schmeh chapter. Just another chapter of picking a subject, doing as many gags as you can with that subject, and then ending the chapter when you're out of ideas. There's no story here, it's just showing what the future in Dreamland would be like, beating up Dedede along the way. No real substance here and really not that funny. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 8 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 9, the heart-pounding, very real game of life. The chapter starts with Kirby, King Dedede, and Poppy going to the toy store together to try and find a game to play. King Dedede gets nostalgic when he sees the game of life in there, and Kirby decides to get it. The shopkeeper says that the board game is actually being recalled and the vendor is coming back to get it, but Kirby takes it anyway. They start playing the board game and already things get weird when the game pieces morph to look like them. Meanwhile, at the game shop, Madoo, the peddler of darkness, comes to pick up his game only to learn that it was given to Kirby and the others. Back at the castle, the gang start the game and then get sucked into the board game. Madoo arrives just as they get sucked in and tells them that they must beat the game to escape. They very quickly learn that whatever it says on the space they land on will actually happen to them. Of course, being a game that is supposed to have bad things happen that wouldn't normally happen to you in real life, they now have to experience all bad things. Well, except for Kirby, of course. Everyone starts getting close to the goal when King Dedede is forced to go back to the start of the game, having to endure the torture all over again. Poppy ends up winning and escaping the game first, and then Kirby right after. After going through another round of torture, King Dedede finally escapes. Kirby, finding the whole experience fun, decides to play the game again, this time to win, sucking them all back into the board game. Ending the chapter. This one was much better. I definitely like the chapters that have a proper story progression instead of just being a vehicle for gag after gag. King Dedede having to go back to the start of the game after almost finishing was so good, and Kirby resetting the game was the perfect ending. Best chapter so far. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 9 gets my rating of an A+. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 10, The Founding of Kirby Land. The chapter begins with King Dedede enjoying a piece of strawberry shortcake. As is his preference, King Dedede decides to save the strawberry for last. Kirby barges in and, thinking that King Dedede was just picking off the strawberry, eats it as to not waste it. King Dedede gets so upset he ends up exiling Kirby from Dreamland forever. All of their friends try to convince King Dedede that he's being too harsh, but Kirby decides he doesn't want to be in a country with such a tyrannical king, and decides to make his own country, Kirby Land. Kirby declares independence, having a 10-foot circle drawn around his house, the border being Gooey's tongue. King Dedede laughs it off, and everyone does not want to live in Kirby Land. Kirby tries to sell it to his friends, and after offering to have them live there only for a day, the animal friends decide to play along. They receive membership cards, have to endure Kirby singing, and live tightly within this circle. Kirby decides that it's packed a little too tight and decides to try and expand his territory. King Dedede objects, but their war over land ends pretty quickly, and Kirby ends up stretching Kirby Land over a significant distance. Poor Gooey. King Dedede ends up strengthening border security to make sure no one in Kirby Land crosses over or tries to expand. Kirby realizes there's no restaurants in Kirby Land, so he tries to cross the border to get ramen. Kirby gets searched for dangerous items, and they find ninja stars, bombs, missiles, and drills on him. King Dedede keeps making his country look better and better, making the animal friends leave one by one, the only one left being Coo. Coo gives Kirby the advice to make his country better, but Kirby can't think of any good ideas. The king makes it worse to live in by making Kracko go above it and start raining constantly. Is that Kracko's pee? This causes a war between Kirby and Dedede of trying to make their countries worse and worse to convince people to move out. This results in both countries getting completely demolished and the denizens of Dreamland exiling both Kirby and King Dedede. The chapter ends with them both being on a deserted island that they deem the Kirby and Dedede Republic. This is the type of gag chapter that I like more. There is a clear story and conflict here and isn't just unmotivated gag after unmotivated gag. The conflict between Kirby and King Dedede is petty and entertaining to read. Ending it by Napoleon Bonaparting the both of them was pretty funny. Just an overall good chapter. With all of that in mind, Volume 1 Chapter 10 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 1 Chapter 11. The Big Comeback, Things Kirby Always Wanted to Try. This is a very fourth wall-y breaky one, so be warned, Kirby might try to crawl out of your screen. The chapter starts with the gang celebrating that this is the first new chapter that they've gotten in years, and in Koro Koro and Nikki of all magazines. Kirby decides to be gold to celebrate, not realizing that the manga is black and white, so it doesn't really matter anyway. King Dedede also shows up in a regal new appearance once he sees Kirby do it. Kirby realizes that Koro Koro Nikki is more of a grown-up magazine than their old one, so they try to do some new things. Kirby decides to pig out, the difference being that it's grown-up foods this time. King Dedede, all of a sudden feeling competitive, decides to add a romantic subplot between him and Ribbon. Or him and Kirby. After Kirby realizes that he doesn't want to be with King Dedede, he thinks maybe they can try being a serious manga instead of a gag one. This ends up making Kirby too depressed to continue. Poppy shows up to warn everyone to wrap it up because the artist is getting tired of drawing, so Kirby tries one more thing. A giant 2-page spread. This chapter was cute, nothing groundbreaking, but cute. Fourth wall breaks are my weakness when done right. It can be really funny, and this chapter certainly did it right. Them having to end the chapter because the author was getting tired was actually a pretty funny joke. With all of that in mind, Volume 1, Chapter 11 gets my rating of an A. That concludes our coverage of Volume 1 of Kirby Manga Mania. We will be doing a brief intermission before hitting Volume 2, so I hope you enjoy these mini dubs by the amazing talent over at the DUBASSES channel.
Ikawa-sensei, I'm here to help, people!
Thanks, Kirby.
First, I need you to look at this.
What's this, a contract? What does this say about all-nighters?
Won't do 'em.
Picking up lunch?
Not me.
Complex backgrounds, like overhead shots, crowds, etc.?
No drawing those.
Finishing touches, blacks and white out?
Lousy at 'em. I'm asking for $1,000 per day with 3 free meals and a nap included.
Beat it!
Welcome back everyone to our review of every chapter in Kirby Manga Mania. Last time we finished up Volume 1, so we're going to jump right into Volume 2. But before we do, make sure to check out our merch store in the description below where you can buy our hats, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. Without further ado, let's get to the review. Next up is Volume 2, Chapter 1. Everybody wants to be the King of Dreamland? The chapter begins with King Dedede walking through town, flaunting all of the stuff he just bought on a shopping spree. Everyone gets jealous and wants Dedede to share, but the king declares that due to his royalty, he needs to live in the lap of luxury. Ku questions how or why King Dedede even is king in the first place, since he doesn't act like a king. This prompts the townspeople to revolt, and now there is an election for who will be the next king. I don't think that's how monarchies work, but sure. Kirby, Rick, Ku, Kine, and King Dedede are now all competing over the title of king. Kirby decides to mess with the competition to make them look lame, putting Ku and Rick out of the race. Kirby and Dedede get scared when it seems Kine has the regal spirit, but in reality he just fell asleep. With only Kirby and King Dedede left in the running, the king lures Kirby into a meeting room to talk one-on-one. In reality, he's just gonna fight him for it, not expecting Kirby to dual-wield hammers. When they come out, Kirby has crawled inside of Dedede's mouth Skinwalker style and says that he's going out of the race. No one falls for this though, and King Dedede proves he has more loyal subjects, even though he clearly just bought their affection. Kirby and King Dedede constantly one-up each other with stupid accomplishments. Poppy decides to end the nonsense by just leaving it up to a vote. A few people raise their hand for Kirby, and no one raises their hand for Dedede, mostly because Kirby inhaled them all. With that, Kirby becomes the King of Dreamland and gets the entire castle remodeled to look like him. This puts him millions of dollars in debt, When confronted with the bill, he leaves the crown to Dedede and lets him be the king to take care of it, ending the chapter. This chapter was pretty middle of the road. The gags were just silly little gags like usual, but it was cool seeing the other characters trying to take the limelight. Plus, King Dedede's plans always backfiring is pretty much always funny. Kirby leaving Dedede with the national debt was also a pretty hilarious ending. With all that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 1 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 2, Kirby becomes a walking weapon? The chapter begins with everyone visiting the dojo of the judo master, Ju-Kid. It is revealed that King Dedede and Poppy opened this dojo in order to get loaded off of Ju-Kid's classes. Kirby, Rick, Ku, and Kine walk in to become students. Kirby almost immediately makes a mockery out of the class by showing up in a bathrobe, pouring sauce on Ju-Kid, and inhaling him out of frustration, becoming Suplex Kirby. Kirby uses his new suplex ability to throw King Dedede, winning his match against him. It becomes clear when he goes to shake Rick's hand that whatever Kirby touches, he throws. His body is moving on its own. Kirby ends up hurting all of his friends and, worst of all, can't even eat food without throwing it. Ku tries to feed him but ends up getting thrown himself. Kirby tries to inhale the food himself but just doesn't have the energy. King Dedede thinks this is an opportunity for payback, but just ends up getting thrown like the rest. Kirby ends up getting so hungry he goes berserk, throwing everything around him, including the entirety of Planet Popstar. All this throwing makes Kirby throw up Ju-Kid, making him go back to normal, ending the chapter. There's something really funny about Kirby being forced to throw everything while in the throw ability. It kind of feels like it's taking the game mechanic and putting a funny edge on it. I appreciate that about this manga. I kinda just wish it went more places with it instead of ending as abruptly as it did. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 2 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 3, Kirby, Volunteer Thief? The chapter begins with Tak stealing a bunch of things from the town. He decides to make his next hit, Kirby's house. Kirby wakes up when Tak makes a stir because he is getting sleep eaten. Kirby wonders what Tak is doing in his house, and after getting annoyed at his stupid guesses, he admits that he's a thief. Kirby chases after him and goes to take him to jail. Tak convinces Kirby that he's the good kind of thief. He steals things, fixes them and polishes them up, and then returns them. Kirby decides that this is such a noble venture that he's going to help out. This results in Kirby becoming a much more psychopathic thief than Tak was ready for. He bonks Rick on the head, ties Ku up, and almost drowns Tak. After all of these shenanigans, Tak gets so tired that Kirby decides to take over. He immediately gets caught by everyone in town. Tak starts to panic, but Kirby covers him by smushing him in his stone form. Kirby then starts dancing. Everyone asks Kirby if he's seen anybody suspicious, but Kirby diverts them away from a very mangled Tak and himself by pointing them in a completely random direction. Kirby takes Tak back to his house to rest when he sees all of the stuff that's been stolen so far. Kirby goes to return it, believing it to be polished already. As Kirby gets away, Tak starts shouting for Thief, getting him caught by the townspeople. As he's getting beaten up, Kirby bumps into a wall and accidentally swallows all of the stolen goods. Kirby decides to just sleep it off and apologize later. The next morning, Kirby goes to apologize to Tak as he runs away scared, revealing that he gave up being a thief and is just a mailman now. The chapter ends with King Dedede being glad he had no scenes in this chapter, having a peaceful day. This was definitely one of the better chapters. I like when these chapters actually have full stories to them, instead of just being a collection of jokes. Tak is definitely an antagonist that deserves all of the torment Kirby gives him. Also, Kirby fully going along with Tak's lie and making it bite him in the ass is pretty funny. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 3 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 4, Hero Kirby Appears. In an alternate dimension where sword and sorcery reign, a hero is given the task to defeat the Dark Lord. That hero is King Dedede? King Waddle Doo reveals that he also sent for another hero to travel with Dedede. That hero is Kirby, showing up in some pretty cool pixel art, honestly. With that, the two heroes set off on their quest. They encounter Gooey on their first battle. Apparently Kirby decided to play Undertale because he's deciding to do a pacifist run, hurting Dedede for bullying the enemies. Wow, he really is in the Undertale fanbase. Due to this, the only one dealing damage is Kirby, and the only one taking damage is King Dedede. King Dedede wonders how they're going to level up and get gold if they don't fight, and Kirby suggests getting an actual job. This actually works as it levels up their stats and gives them gold to buy equipment. Some of these stat level ups are better than others. King Dedede decides to go get a weapon to go defeat the Dark Lord, but Kirby already spent all of their money on food, leaving Dedede with nothing but a popsicle stick. Dedede decides to gather information from the townspeople to find out more about the Dark Lord, but there's just so many of them. Kirby then inhales them all and says everything the townspeople are saying in quick succession. They decide they need some rest and sleep at an inn. Unfortunately, they have no gold still, forcing them to sleep on the stairs. During their sleep, King Dedede wakes up with a concerning amount of HP. Kirby reveals that he and Gooey stole his HP in order to fully heal themselves. Finally, they make it to the Dark Lord's tower, and get ready to face their final boss. Except Dedede, who has all of the cheapest equipment possible. After solving a multitude of puzzles and beating the boss rush, which just consisted of Kain, Nago, ChuChu, and Ku, they finally reach the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord is Poppy. Poppy, being the kind soul that he is, deems King Dedede better fit to be the final boss, and Kirby defeats him, saving the kingdom. Or at least he would've if he didn't eat their entire stock of food. Another great chapter with a bunch of solid jokes. All of the RPG tropes being turned upon their head by Kirby was fun to read, and never crossed the threshold of just seeming annoying or just telling jokes for joke's sake. Kirby made a mockery of RPGs but kept the story going at the same time, instead of hindering the goals of the plot. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 4 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 5, Operation Kirby Secret Agents. The chapter begins with Poppy handing a videotape off to Kirby. Kirby puts the tape on his TV, and a mysterious figure appears on the TV that totally isn't King Dedede, giving Kirby and his friends their mission. The figure has gained intel that Meta Knight is planning to launch a missile to destroy Castle Dedede and take over Dreamland himself. Their mission is to infiltrate Meta Knight's base and destroy the missile. With that, Agent Kirby, Agent Ku, Agent ChuChu, Agent Rick, and Agent Gooey are on the job. They start to infiltrate Meta Knight's base, avoiding all of the spotlights, only to get immediately caught when Kirby starts singing in the spotlights. This makes it so they must flee in the sewers to get into the base from underneath. Meta Knight sends in his troops to go after them. In order to keep the mission alive, Kirby gives himself up so that the others can continue their infiltration. Kirby is brought directly to Meta Knight, who tries to get him to talk. Meta Knight tries to torture him, but Kirby ends up torturing himself. Meta Knight gets annoyed and throws Kirby in the dungeon. Instead of Kirby trying to escape the dungeon, he ends up just making a living space out of the stuff he inhaled before. Ku and the others break Kirby out of the dungeon, and they find the missile and investigate it. They notice a weird orb on top of the missile and wonder what that is. Meta Knight makes his appearance and reveals that the missile is loaded with pepper. He only intends to prank Dedede, making him sneeze and writhe for hours. Meta Knight goes to fight them but trips over Gooey and breaks his mask, making him immediately give up. Trying to finish their mission, Kirby places bombs on top of the missile to destroy it, but unfortunately the missile launches before they could blow up the missile. This causes the missile to land on Castle Dedede, blowing up the whole castle. Kirby reports his failure as the chapter ends. Another banger chapter. This volume is doing great so far. For one thing, Meta Knight finally appearing is so good. I love that he's a mostly serious character in the world of wackiness. The part where the others are surprised that the missile didn't have explosives in it and Meta Knight just says, "I should think not, that could kill somebody," was actually legitimately funny. This may be my favorite chapter so far. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 5 gets my rating of an A+. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 6, Kirby joins the Self-Control Dojo? The chapter begins with King Dedede struggling to control himself, waiting for his cup of ramen to be done. King Dedede is about to cave and eat some crunchy noodles, but gets stopped by Sasuke, who teaches him to exercise self-control. Sasuke makes him wait and shows him how worth it is. They hear someone shout that they can't control themselves, and Sasuke and King Dedede go running to see who the source of it is. Of course, it's Kirby. Kirby is having trouble controlling himself, needing to scratch his ass. Sasuke tries to stop him and have him maintain self-control, but Kirby scratches it up against Wispy. Sasuke scolds him and decides to take him and Dedede to his self-control dojo in order to learn how to have the utmost of self-control. Sasuke starts showing some of his pupils to our heroes, being able to withstand pains in order to get to the paradise on the other side. Kirby doesn't really get it, but King Dedede gets it real fast, being able to watch a 25-hour marathon without falling asleep. Sasuke starts heavily training Kirby when all of a sudden, Rocky shows up, a master from a rival dojo. Sasuke goes to fight him but exercises his self-control and has Kirby do it for him. Kirby and Rocky start competing in bouts of self-control, with Kirby finally coming out on top with his controlling himself at karaoke when someone else picked your best song so now you can't pick it technique. Sasuke congratulates Kirby on his newfound prowess, but Kirby decides to sing his stresses away, which no one can withstand, not even Sasuke. This chapter was just alright. It was funny to see the trials Kirby and King Dedede would endure in the name of self-control. Other than that though, there's no real progression in the story to drive the comedy. It's just a bunch of disembodied jokes with a central theme. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 6 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 7. Go for the Gold, the Dreamland Olympics. The chapter begins with Kirby and the others going to watch the Dreamland Olympics. Kirby wants to win a gold medal, but the event he wants to enter, speed eating, isn't at the Olympics anymore. This is when they meet the director of the Olympics, Mr. TikTok. Mr. TikTok reveals that speed eating was banned from the Olympics for being too dangerous. A plasma wisp passing by says that they're going to be late for the string figures event. Mr. TikTok gets confused, saying that string figures was cancelled 36 years ago. The plasma wisp runs away and they give chase, finding a secret staircase leading underground. Down there, they find an underground Olympics that plays all of the banned events in a sanctioned manner. They find the signups for speed eating, but Kirby just misses the cut. When they hear the announcement for the Funny Faces competition, Kirby gets excited as Mr. TikTok looks horrified at Funny Faces in particular. Considering only 2 people signed up for the event, the finals immediately happen with Kirby going up against Cappy. Mr. TikTok then tells the story of how dangerous the Funny Faces competition was, since he would know from experience. Mr. TikTok made a face so funny that his opponent never stopped laughing for 3 hours straight, and now, whenever he thinks about the face, even for a second, it starts all over again. Cappy then says how he was inspired by the prowess that was Mr. TikTok's funny face skill. This moves Mr. TikTok to the point where he'll let the competition continue, but only if he supervises. After a back and forth of the funniest faces you'll ever see, Mr. TikTok decides it's gone too far and ends the match, leaving it a draw. Everyone congratulates Kirby when it is revealed that Kirby made funny faces for so long that now it's stuck. It is then said that funny faces competitions were then banned from even the Underground Olympics. Ironically, I didn't find the chapter all about funny faces to be that funny. The concept of having an Underground Olympics where the events are all ridiculous banned events is pretty funny, and having Mr. TikTok treat them like they're these uber dangerous activities is even better. It's when the chapter devolves into just Kirby and Cappy making funny faces where it falls off for me. The faces were more terrifying than funny, honestly. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 7 gets my rating of a B-. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 8. A full course on table manners? The chapter begins with Kirby and his friends going to a fancy restaurant. Kirby, being his usual Kirby self, starts exhibiting a bunch of bad manners. King Dedede, who is at the next table, warns Kirby that the chef at this restaurant is a huge stickler for table manners. Kirby doesn't heed the warning and starts inhaling all of the food, summoning said chef, Chef Cookin'. Chef Cookin' tries to show Kirby how to have good table manners, but it just results in Kirby doing a bunch of bad manners in the name of good manners. King Dedede decides to show Kirby just how it's done and passes with flying colors. Chef Cookin' also joins in, showing Kirby just how beautiful good table manners can make the dining experience. Chef Cookin' puts Kirby through a bunch of table manners trials to train him for his ultimate test. At first, it seems like the test is just to eat a normal meal while minding your manners. The catch is that all of the food is horrible. Will Kirby pretend the food tastes good, politely tell the waiter that it's not to your taste and get something else, or get mad and flip the table? What Chef Cookin' didn't expect is that Kirby created a fourth option. Kirby chooses to give honest feedback while still asking for seconds. Chef Cookin', moved by this show of good manners, lets Kirby eat all he wants today for free. You can probably see where this goes. This chapter was, again, just alright. I know it's absurd to want story progression in a gag manga, but having a self-contained step-by-step story will always be better to me than an event that is just a vehicle for jokes, if that makes sense. This chapter, unfortunately, is that. If there is one thing I appreciate about this series is that it sticks to game characters. It doesn't create original characters for the sake of it. At first I thought Chef Cookin' was an original character, but then I remembered, no, this is a dude from Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. I love moments like that. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 8 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 9, the start of the Eraser Shock? The chapter starts on a peaceful day in Dreamland until one day, Kirby goes into the store to get an eraser and they are sold out. Apparently, this is the third store they've been to try and get one. It dawns on them that they must be going through an eraser shortage. It is revealed that King Dedede bought every eraser in Dreamland as a get-rich-quick scheme advised by his new money advisor, Tick. The plan is that since the artisan that makes the erasers in Dreamland is too busy watching baseball to make more erasers, King Dedede is going to buy the entire supply in order to be able to resell them when they are in high demand. Everything goes according to plan to a ridiculous degree. Erasers start becoming hot-button collectibles to the point where people, like Kirby, are keeping them in glass cases. The rich are making them a part of their clothes, and people are able to buy an entire house with just one eraser. Tick tells Dedede that this is the perfect time to sell, to make maximum profit, but the king refuses, thinking of how much more value the erasers can get. Kirby starts using his eraser like normal, or at least as normal as Kirby can use an eraser, and everything goes back to the way it was, making erasers' value plummet back down, leaving the king with a mountain of erasers he can't do anything with. Except play dominoes, I guess. Usually I'm not into these gag-filled chapters, but something about this one really tickled me. Just seeing how far this eraser joke gets escalated was pretty fun, and seeing people use it on clothes is mad funny. I'm surprised people didn't do that with toilet paper in 2020. A classic case of good escalation, and the pretentious side of me wants to say a good commentary on perceived value in a capitalist society. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 9 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 2 Chapter 10, Eye in the Sky, Kracko cracks down on Kirby. The chapter begins with Kirby starting his day by casually inhaling 38 people. Kirby then gets struck by lightning all of a sudden and told to stop doing that. Kracko scolds Kirby and demands he apologizes. King Dedede shows up and tells Kirby that Kracko has a stick up his ass and likes to ruin people's fun. Kirby then starts being his usual rowdy self as Kracko berates him every step of the way. Kirby gets so sick of Kracko's rules that he decides to make his own rules. First, never skip breakfast. Second, take a nap after meals. And most importantly, the rule so grand that it almost takes up an entire page: no rules that disallow things that are allowed. Well, this chapter was nothing. It was just Kirby doing things, Kracko yelling at him for living, and then Kirby deciding to live free and easy like he always has. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, and honestly, barely any jokes. This may be the worst chapter so far. With all of that in mind, Volume 2 Chapter 10 gets my rating of an F. With that, we've reached the end of the second volume of Kirby Manga Mania. Before we end the video and move on to Volume 3, I hope you enjoy another performance from the DUBASSES crew.
Starting today, I shall call you Big Bro.
What brought that on?
Big Bro, let's climb trees. Come on, Big Bro.
All right. Bet you can't beat me.
Big Bro, let's play catch. Big Bro, Big Bro.
All right, let's toss the old ball around. You know, I think I could get used to this.
Now it's my turn to be the big bro.
Huh?
Go on, call me big bro.
Big bro?
Not like that, like this, with big puppy dog eyes. Big bro!
Like this? Big bro?
That's not right. How many times do I have to tell you? Pay attention! Big bro!
This has lost its appeal.
Welcome back everyone to our review of every chapter in Kirby Manga Mania. Last time we finished up Volume 2, so we're going to jump right into Volume 3. But before we do, make sure to check out our merch store in the description below where you can buy our shirts, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. Without further ado, let's get to the review. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 1, The Way of Laughs? The chapter begins with a narrator describing Kirby that although he is a hero, he is also a gag manga protagonist who must meet a quota of 1 laugh per page. Honestly, that explains a lot. At one point, King Dedede shows up and hears the narrator give Kirby a glowing description, even if it's a bit untrue. King Dedede gets jealous and asks for one, but it's less than flattering. Kirby then shows off a bunch of his signature jokes, like thanking every bit of rice he eats, for example. King Dedede attempts to do a signature joke, but it gets cut for not being funny. The narrator then questions what it means to be a professional at comedy, and Kirby actually kinda gives a profound answer. To me, a professional is someone who can turn everything into a joke even during hard times. This chapter is just a stuff happens chapter. I think the only joke that really got a chuckle out of me was Dedede's joke being cut. Other than that, not a lot of substance to this one. With all of that in mind, Volume 3 Chapter 1 gets my rating of a C. Next up is Volume 3 Chapter 2, Not Quite Right? A Kirby Blast from the Past. The chapter begins with Kirby going up to his friends and they notice something a little different. Kirby, for some reason, looks exactly like he did in Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy. Everyone starts making fun of Kirby, saying his face does not look cute, when King Dedede pushes him into the castle to get away from prying eyes. He questions why Kirby looks like this, and Kirby speculates that it is because he played Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy for too long. Kirby comes up with the idea that he may turn back to normal if he plays the newest game, Kirby Star Allies. It kinda works, but it makes him look more like modern game Kirby rather than the Kirby from the manga. Kirby then reads a bunch of manga, but unfortunately he read Volume 25, which was apparently the manga where Hikawa was at his worst. They make him read Chapter 14, and now he's back to his normal Kirby manga self. Kirby ends the chapter with commenting on how the Cappies haven't changed design in 25 years. As much as this is a very short, gag-filled chapter, it was really fun seeing the different Kirby designs. Just for that simple little fact, I really like this chapter. Seeing the artist change his art style to match the other Kirby designs and even do a little self-deprecating humor for a time was actually a pretty funny joke. With all of that in mind, Volume 3 Chapter 2 gets my rating of an A+. Next up is Volume 3 Chapter 3, King Dedede's Hobby Hunt. King Dedede starts talking to us as well as Hikawa through narration about hobbies. King Dedede finds that he doesn't really have a hobby. Kirby shows up and starts saying how he's got tons of hobbies like eating and singing karaoke. King Dedede starts to get upset that he doesn't have a hobby, especially when Ku points out that not having hobbies could lead to Dedede dying alone. They try to get Dedede into reading, but he only likes picture books. Hey, just like in the anime! They suggest movies, but only show him boring ones. They suggest video games, but King Dedede ironically doesn't like video games. And they suggest playing a musical instrument, but Kirby gives him a musical saw. King Dedede gives up on trying to find a hobby of his own and just tells Kirby to think of one for him. They go through dress-up, shopping sprees, and being nostalgic, but none of them really suit the king. This is when the king realizes he's had a hobby all along: fighting Kirby. Another chapter that's just a vehicle for jokes rather than an actual story. Chapters like these really remind me of newspaper funnies. Slightly entertaining, but never really gets a laugh out of me. I'm really struggling to say anything about this chapter at all, really. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 3 gets my rating of a C-. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 4, Go Get 'Em, King Dedede Musclehead Mania. The chapter begins with everyone being upset that King Dedede is the new star of the manga. Even though this is Kirby Manga Mania, King Dedede in all of his excitement accidentally throws out his back. He tries to get up regardless, but Kirby just hurts him more so he can. This results in, next up is Volume 3, Chapter 4, Miracle Poppy back with a bang. Poppy shows his stuff now that he's the star, being able to throw millions of bombs at once. Someone questions his hero status and, Jesus Christ. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 4, Masked Swordsman Meta Knight, The Legend Begins. A whole fan club gathers around Meta Knight, but this doesn't stop the chapter from devolving into an all-out brawl over who gets the main character role. They fight for so long, the chapter ends and we get a tease of an all-new manga, Waddle Doo World. This was another fun one like the Kirby Face one a couple of chapters ago, mostly because I just like seeing all the cover page mock-ups for other mangas based on the Kirby franchise. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd totally read a Meta Knight manga. Hell, I'd even read a King Dedede manga. Sorry, Poppy. Another fun short chapter. We've been getting a lot of short chapters lately. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 4 gets my rating of an A-. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 5, Budding Ego? Everyone's Idol Kirby. The chapter starts with Kirby realizing that he's an international superstar. Ku then says something which makes me question what this universe is. Ku points out that Game Kirby is really popular. Are Game Kirby and this Kirby two different people? I guess they've kinda implied it before. Either way, this makes Kirby come to the conclusion that he has to act more like an idol star. He starts lying about himself, saying he's from Planet Applestar and that he exercises and eats healthy every day to stay in shape. Then he details the new way he's going to get copy abilities. He establishes a friendship and charms the enemy before inhaling them and getting their ability. This method makes it so everyone wants to get inhaled by Kirby. He then goes to unveil a new copy ability, Flower Kirby, which is just Kirby wearing spring clothing. Kirby then hears that we, yes, the reader, want to be inhaled by him too. So we get inhaled by Kirby, and I don't know what it is about this texture that represents the inside of Kirby, but it makes me uncomfortable. Is this 4? It's not great. Kirby then asks us how it was in his mouth. Never ask me that again. Ku then points out that Kirby hasn't said peepo once in this entire chapter. I haven't really made it clear through my narration, but my visuals probably showed you that Kirby has a vocal tick where he says peepo a lot. They take this as completely denying who he is at his core as Kirby ends out the chapter, King Dedede hoping he returns to normal by the next chapter. Once again, this is another Stuff Happens chapter. Kirby decides to become more like a corporate Japanese idol star and they run with that. Damn, missed opportunity to really show the dark side of being an idol. Your management controlling your whole life, dictating if you're allowed to date or not, starving you to control your weight. Man, I wish Kirby covered that. I'm joking, of course, I don't want that. The chapter just abruptly ends too, which I'm starting to get a little sick of. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 5 gets my rating of a C-. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 6, Waddle Dee's Woes? I guess we are getting that Waddle Dee manga. This chapter starts with a Waddle Dee realizing just how many of his kind there are. This drives him to want to rise the ranks and become a unique Waddle Dee, to become a boss character. And King Dedede reveals that each Waddle Dee goes through a rigorous training process in order to get the role of Waddle Dee they are. Waddle Dee tries out different abilities, but they just end up being copies of Poppy and King Dedede. Kirby tries to get him to think of what special talents he has, but he can't think of anything and gets depressed. Waddle Dee points out that all Kirby does is copy abilities, which sends Kirby into his own depression. Kirby and Waddle Dee both realize that they have a passion for eating, so they keep eating and eating and eating and eating. Through all the eating, the Waddle Dee became a chunky Waddle Dee, making him more unique. Until he realizes that big Waddle Dees already exist. Oh well. I feel like that out of all of the short, gag-filled chapters we've been going over, this one is a little bit better since it's not centered around Kirby or Dedede. It's centered around a side character like Waddle Dee. That, and I think I'm realizing that I don't like it when a character's gags all center around unintentionally annoying another character. I definitely like it better when it's in service to helping a character grow, even if it's as little as how it is in this manga. Watching Waddle Doo try new things was fun. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 6 gets my rating of an A-. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 7. Everyone is friends and star allies? We're getting a good amount of Kirby Star Allies references in this volume. Neat. The chapter starts with Kirby showing off that he is going on an all-new adventure in Kirby Star Allies. He then shows off the function of the friend heart, that he can throw it at his enemies and become instant friends. Kirby ends up having Poppy, Burning Leo, and Waddle Doo join his party in order to adventure. Kirby even uses Burning Leo to get the Sizzle Sword, which he then uses to chop and cook at the same time. We even see the friend platforms and friend wheel ability as well. King Dedede then appears, showing how he looks in Kirby Star Allies. Big and buffy and meaty. Kirby asks how he did that, and he reveals that it was because he stuck with a workout routine. Dude doesn't want to talk about the Jamba Hearts, huh? Kirby and his friends beat the crap out of him until there's not much muscle left. Kirby decides to be friends with Dedede, so he'll join his team, giving him a chocolate heart. King Dedede agrees and immediately regrets it when he becomes Kirby's mighty steed. Another shorty chapter, but I don't know. This was a fun commercial for Kirby Star Allies. For one thing, I don't mind the gag-filled contents of this chapter because a lot of them are just fun subversions of the actual game mechanics in Kirby Star Allies. It was pretty funny seeing how this gag manga would turn the gameplay mechanics of Kirby Star Allies on its head. Second, it's really cool when the manga makes a direct reference to the games like this. I hope there's more chapters like this in the future. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 7 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 8. Get your grumbles out. The chapter begins with Kirby finding Poppy seemingly upset. Poppy starts venting about how the king has been in such a sour mood lately and that he's taking it out on him. Poppy then shouts that he's not his slave out of anger, but then gets embarrassed after he does. Kirby says that it's better if Poppy just gets it out of his system, but he's worried someone will hear. Kirby then puts Poppy in his mouth since his mouth is soundproof. Poppy shouts all he wants in there and comes out a new man. The news spreads very quickly and very soon everyone wants to shout their frustrations into Kirby's mouth. King Dedede shows up to see what the commotion is about and Kirby tells him. King Dedede says he doesn't need to do it because he could just say it to his face. Kirby then starts to feel something bubbling up from inside of him and everything that was shouted within him comes bursting out of Kirby. One of the things is so bad it just gets bleeped out entirely. Kirby then decides that he wants to try shouting frustrations into someone's mouth, so he goes inside of King Dedede's and shouts his frustrations about going on a meat bun diet. He shouts so hard, King Dedede's eyes pop right out of the sockets, leaving King Dedede writhing in pain. We're really sticking to the shorty boys this time. This one just kind of felt like a worse retread of the one about Gooey being stuck on King Dedede. The fact that there's things a character doesn't want others to hear, and then at the end they all get blurted out, is the same as Gooey saying all of King Dedede's thoughts. That chapter had dark matter. This chapter did not. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 8 gets my rating of a C. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 9. Scorching Summer Battle? Kirby vs. Burning Leo. The chapter begins on a scorching hot summer day. King Dedede is so hot, he becomes an analog horror character. If I had a nickel for every time King Dedede became an analog horror character, I'd have 2 nickels. I did this joke before. King Dedede then finds Kirby and his friends cooling off all over the castle. Kirby is in the air conditioner, Rick is in the fridge, Ku is using all of the fans, and Kine is taking a bath. King Dedede starts dying from all the heat as Burning Leo shows up to chat on all these virgins. Everyone's complaining gets Burning Leo so mad, he explodes more flames, making it even hotter. Burning Leo then says he's going to make everybody exercise. Dedede tries to stop them, but Burning Leo gets mad, whipping Dedede into line. Kirby decides to roast a sweet potato on Burning Leo, which, for some reason, impresses Burning Leo. This leads to a bunch of gags about Kirby and Burning Leo making things hotter and hotter and hotter. King Dedede gets so tired of the heat that he begs Kirby to inhale Burning Leo. King Dedede feels bad for doing this to Burning Leo, not knowing that Kirby has now become Fire Kirby, who is now acting like Burning Leo. King Dedede makes Kirby spit out Burning Leo, which just doubles the problem. After learning that Kirby is hotter than Burning Leo, they start getting into a competition to make things hotter and hotter and hotter. The chapter ends with Kirby winning the competition and everyone else dying. I know I have been commenting on how much the previous chapters have been very short, but this one was way too long. The gags about making things hotter wasn't that funny to have so much dedicated to it. It was just kind of boring and felt dragged out. The only funny frame of the chapter was the final one where everyone's just dead. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 9 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 10, Kirby beats the Bad Lord with ninja skills. In an alternate dimension where the Kirby characters are back in Edo, Japan, our characters Kirby, Rick, Ku, and Kine stop the Lord's lackeys from stealing food from the townspeople. The four ninjas make their way towards the castle to confront the Bad Lord Dedede using their different ninja techniques. Kirby then comes up on King Dedede's own personal ninja guard, Biospark. Kirby fakes everyone out by using a substitution technique, and Kirby retaliates by completely decimating every single muscle and bone in the man's body. Kirby finally confronts Dedede and starts using a quick-moving doubling technique. King Dedede tries to keep up, but Kirby replaces all of his doubles with bomb dolls. Kirby places so many bombs, however, that not only does he obliterate the castle, but the entire town. Well, I guess that's a victory. This chapter gets points for being an actual story. We haven't gotten one of those in quite a while. Unfortunately, the chapter just isn't that funny. We haven't quite hit that balance yet, but the chapter isn't boring, so I'll give it that. I'm glad I'm not the only one who finds the name Biospark for the ninja character weird. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 10 gets my rating of a B-. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 11, Sleepover at King Dedede's. The chapter begins with Kirby, King Dedede, and the others playing Kick the Can. Everyone seems to be having a good time other than King Dedede, as usual. All of a sudden, it starts pouring rain, forcing everyone inside. According to the weather, the rain is supposed to continue until the next morning, making everyone have to stay the night at the castle. King Dedede tries to get everyone to get to sleep, but of course, Kirby makes that difficult, making everyone laugh by singing the fart song. King Dedede gets so worked up over everybody that he ends up not being able to sleep after everyone else is. Well, except for Kirby. Kirby keeps King Dedede up by being annoying as usual, but eventually Kirby does go to bed. At this point, King Dedede can't sleep at all and gets very jumpy at everything. Finally, King Dedede starts to go to sleep, but as he's sleeping, he starts to feel extremely warm and finds difficulty breathing. Turns out, Kirby is sleep-eating King Dedede. Why is everyone friends with Kirby? Even while Kirby is sleeping, he's causing things that make it impossible for Dedede to sleep. King Dedede starts to count sheep, but realizes he's actually counting townspeople walking out of Kirby's mouth. I repeat, why do people in this manga like Kirby? The king ends up going to the bathroom and Kirby wakes up. He asks Kine to give him a light so that he could go potty too. When Dedede sees Kine, Jesus Christ! King Dedede understandably runs away, being too scared to go to the bathroom for the rest of the night, causing him to wet the bed, ending the chapter. Yet another King Dedede torture porn. You could probably tell by the tone while recounting the story that I'm getting a little pooped with this formula. Every character is starting to all seem the same with a different coat of paint. It kind of reminds me of those episodes of SpongeBob where SpongeBob and Patrick just torture Squidward for absolutely no reason when Squidward is just trying to live his life. It's not very fun to watch, and it's not very fun to read either. My question of why they are friends with Kirby is kinda genuine. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 11 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 12, Lots of Dededes? The chapter begins with Adeline showing King Dedede a portrait that she drew of him, combining King Dedede with that of her ideal king. The sketch of King Dedede comes to life and starts being the kingly king that he looks like. Adeline reveals that everything she draws leaps off of the page and comes to life. This is when we see just how much Adeline doodles King Dedede, causing a bunch of King Dedede doppelgangers to come to life. Even Poppy mistakes the real Dedede as one of the copies. King Dedede gets upset and demands that Adeline erase them, which instill the fear of God into the drawings as they run away. The doodles start making friends with the denizens of Dreamland, making everyone like them better than the real Dedede. Everyone even wants the ideal king version of Dedede to replace the original as King of Dreamland. The doodles then gang up on the king as he screams at Adeline for help. She tries to get them back into the canvas, but they just start a giant fight. Adeline escapes as Kirby says that he wants her to draw him too. Adeline then gets the idea that the only way to stop a bunch of Dededes is to pit them against a bunch of Kirbys. This does solve the Dedede problem, but causes an even worse problem of having like 10 Kirbys eating everything in Dreamland. This chapter is a bit better than what we've been getting. I actually like when the manga focuses on characters besides Kirby and Dedede, because when it does, it doesn't devolve into the same types of gags. Adeline's cute bluntness is honestly pretty funny. She knew that her drawings came to life and even then just doodled all of the Dededes. The Kirby's ending was pretty entertaining too. With all of that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 12 gets my rating of an A-. Next up is Volume 3, Chapter 13, breaking a Guinness World Record with disposable chopsticks. The chapter begins with King Dedede going into the cafeteria within the castle to eat with all of his loyal subjects for a change. King Dedede sees a suspicious figure outside and deems it to be Kirby. He stops him before he can mooch off of everyone, but it turns out that it's not Kirby at all. In fact, Kirby's already inside mooching. The guy reveals that he is actually a judge for the Guinness Book of World Records named Benny. He is there because someone in the castle is very, very close to breaking a world record. After a bit of trying to guess who it is, Benny reveals it to be Kurori. He is about to win the world record for most disposable chopsticks split perfectly in half in a row. He's only 8 more chopsticks away from beating the record of 23,591. News starts to spread fast through Dreamland thanks to Kirby, and soon Kurori becomes the most famous person in Dreamland in a matter of panels. Kurori ends up showing his skill in front of the whole town, impressing everybody and becoming even more famous. It comes down to the wire. They are going to the ramen place to split the last pair of chopsticks Kurori needs in order to break the record. Of course, being the last one with the whole thing being televised for everyone in Dreamland to see, he starts to feel very nervous. No, not Kurori. He's doing relatively okay. Kirby is the one who feels very nervous, really beating on the pressure. Kurori goes to do it, but because Kirby sneezes as he's about to, he screws it up, making him tie with the world record. Kurori doesn't seem to mind too much, seeing this as an opportunity to try and beat more records. Kurori goes on to live his life as King Dedede punishes Kirby by starving him. This chapter was a bit more enjoyable, though the ending of Kurori screwing up the last one was predictable as hell. I called it in my brain the moment they brought the world record plot into the forefront. Even then though, it was a nice journey seeing that how big this situation got so quickly. Though there weren't any standout jokes in this chapter either, it makes up for it with its writing, not making Kirby the overly annoying character he can be sometimes. With all that in mind, Volume 3, Chapter 13 gets my rating of a B. That is the end of Volume 3. But before we end the video, move on to Volume 4 next time, we have another presentation by the amazing crew over at DUBASSES.
He worked while going to school. With the money he saved up, he started a business.
We've got the best prices around. Step on up, folks.
He became the CEO of a major corporation with 1,000 employees and hit it big.
I made a bundle.
That ain't right!
It's so chilly pepper outside. Yeah, so cute.
I'm eating tofu night.
Morsels for my muscles.
Why? How are my old man gags any different than his?
Welcome back everyone to our review of every chapter in Kirby Manga Mania. Last time we finished up Volume 3, so we're going to jump right into Volume 4. But before we do, make sure to check out our merch store in the description below, where you can buy our shirts, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. Without further ado, let's just get right back into it. Next up is Volume 4, Chapter 1, Adeline in Love with Love. The chapter begins with Adeline talking about how there's no normal boys around Planet Popstar, just weird creatures. Ku then concludes that Adeline is at about that age where she's starting to think about having a sweetheart. Adeline then states that she wants a boyfriend who is kind, caring, dependable, and hunky. She does say that Kirby has the perfect face for her boyfriend, but nothing else really works. I love that King Dedede is questioning how Kirby is hunky. How does he not look at him? Adeline then gets the idea to draw her ideal boyfriend body and then place Kirby in ball form on top of it, acting as the head. The environment very quickly devolves into a high school romantic comedy manga, with Adeline asking Kirby to walk her home, Adeline and ChuChu fighting over him, and then both girls getting mad at him when Kirby suggests the two girls can share him. After that little spat, Adeline ends the game of romantic comedy and moves on to something else, leaving Kirby to feel like his heart was just toyed with. This one was a shorty, but also a goodie. The chapter's jokes were actually pretty funny, didn't overstay their welcome, and once again didn't overly rely on one character being a menace to another. I'm starting to really like Adeline in these chapters. Being a character who is unapologetically blunt but also still a sweet person, I hope to see more chapters starring her. With all of that in mind, Volume 4 Chapter 1 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 4 Chapter 2, The Biggest Cat Craze of All Time? The chapter begins with the narrator recounting how having cat characters in mangas now are all the rage and is guaranteed popularity. When the characters wonder if they have a cat character, they point to Nago. Nago, however, rejects his identity as a cat and says that he's moved on from that. Kirby has a hard time accepting this, wanting there to be some cat popularity in his manga series, so Nago suggests Kirby should be a cat. At first, Kirby turns himself into a ripoff of the Battle Cats mobile game, but he switches back to his normal face before any lawsuits can be filed. All of a sudden, King Dedede really starts becoming a cat person, treating Kirby like an actual cat, even renaming him to Peepo Cat. Kirby grows bored of this very quickly, but King Dedede already grew too attached to Peepo Cat, begging him to go back. Kirby doesn't want to at first, but then goes back after he finds out he can mooch food and chores out of the king if he plays along. King Dedede realizes that this isn't right and starts crying for Peepo Cat, but Kirby renounces his cat identity. When King Dedede gets really down in the dumps, Nago decides to embrace his catness once again for Dedede's sake. Unfortunately, Dedede specifically wants Peepo Cat in the end. This one is another whatever chapter. Ironically, this is a chapter that could have benefited from more pages. It just feels like they didn't do enough with the concept to warrant calling it a chapter. It almost feels like it cuts off in the middle. There's no resolution, there's no sense of completion, it just ends. With all of that in mind, Volume 4 Chapter 2 gets my rating of a C-. Next up is Volume 4 Chapter 3, Meta Knight's Big Face Reveal? The chapter begins with the narration telling us how cool Meta Knight is. He is the perfect celebrity within Dreamland, but that gets people wondering what he looks like behind the mask. Paparazzi starts chasing Meta Knight, trying to get him to remove his mask. Kirby steps in to help him by inhaling the interviewers. Meta Knight thanks Kirby, but then Kirby tries to take a peek. Meta Knight gets mad when both Kirby and King Dedede are just like the paparazzi, wanting to see under the mask, so he gets mad and leaves. As he flies away though, Meta Knight's mask falls off. Meta Knight puts on a temporary mask and goes off to find his old one. He finds Kirby wearing it, pretending that he's Meta Knight like a little kid would. Meta Knight tries to take his mask back, but Kirby has everyone fooled into thinking that he's Meta Knight, especially since he can make perfect sand boobies. Kirby and Meta Knight decide to settle it with a duel. Due to Meta Knight's impaired vision in his temporary mask, that mask ends up getting cracked only to reveal yet another mask. Meta Knight shows his temporary mask collection, and Kirby trades Meta Knight one for his original mask. Meta Knight puts his mask back on and flies off, only to drop it again. For a chapter with Meta Knight in it, it's not that good this time. I feel like it would have been a funny gag to find out why Meta Knight doesn't want to be seen with his mask off so much. Seeing Meta Knight's mask collection was a pretty funny bit, but other than that, it doesn't really feel like much happens, and it also doesn't feel like they tried any jokes beyond, look at Meta Knight with this weird face. With all of that in mind, Volume 4 Chapter 3 gets my rating of a C-. Next up is Volume 4 Chapter 4, Invincible Gordo's Weakness? The chapter begins with Kirby eating some apples from Wispy Woods with a Gordo stuck to his head. King Dedede asks if he's alright, and Kirby doesn't even seem to notice that Gordo was there. When the king points it out, that's when Kirby feels the pain. Kirby gets mad at Gordo and tries to get his revenge by using his needle ability on him. Gordo then reveals that he is invincible and it's impossible for him to take damage. Kirby then looks up on his smartphone to see if that's true, and it is. But when Gordo finds out that no one really likes him because of this fact, he takes
Emotional, damn it!
Gordo admits that he doesn't have a single friend and he would love to become part of the main Kirby friend roster. He even wants to try the friend circle from Kirby Star Allies. When Kirby and Gordo try to embrace, it just hurts Kirby, making him conclude that they can't be friends. Kirby suggests that maybe King Dedede can be his friend since he's invincible, mistaking the king taking a lot of pain with him being like Gordo. After King Dedede deals with being impaled when trying a belly bump, Kirby suggests maybe they can't be friends, but Gordo can be his pet? That's creepy, Kirby. They then see that Gordo's biggest weakness with making friends is his spikes. They hurt too many people. Gordo then goes off and comes back, showing he rounded off his spikes. When he returns, he expects to be able to finally make some friends, but then takes the biggest damage of his life when Kirby doesn't even recognize him. What's funny to me is that in this panel, to me, he just looks like dark matter. Another example of an okay short chapter. I like how the chapter works into the player's perception of not really liking Gordos at all, since they're just an annoyance in the Kirby games. Creating a story about trying to find him a friend is actually a pretty creative idea. The gags were okay, but the ending joke of Kirby not recognizing Gordo was actually pretty funny. With all of that in mind, Volume 4, Chapter 4 gets my rating of a B. Next up is Volume 4, Chapter 5, Ribbon, the Grown-Up Lady? The chapter begins with Ribbon making her entrance. Everyone swoons over Ribbon, calling her cute and giving her gifts, and they even compare her to an idol. All of a sudden, Ribbon starts feeling like she needs to act like an adult and doesn't want to be treated like a little kid anymore. This confuses everybody, but ChuChu and Adeline understand. Adeline and Ribbon even make plans to go to a singles mixer? What? Kirby tries to change the subject by suggesting to play a game of hide and seek, but Ribbon would rather play truth or dare. Ribbon draws the king stick and dares number 3 to kiss her, which ends up being Kirby. Before any of that can happen, Meta Knight overhears the game and misunderstands what they're talking about. He thinks that they are choosing the next king of Dreamland by luck of the draw. He wants it to be determined by a test of raw strength. Ribbon finds Meta Knight so cool and manly that she asks him out on a date. Meta Knight is just confused and treats her like the little kid she is. This makes Ribbon cry, making Adeline and ChuChu mad at him, which just confuses Meta Knight even more. Kirby swoops in to try and hit the rebound, and they agree to a date at the beach. When they get there, they just start playing like little kids again, setting everything back to normal. This is definitely one of the funnier chapters we've read through so far. I love that Meta Knight is the most serious character in this gag manga, and him being confused at the madness going on around him will never not be funny to me. They even take a dig at the character designer for Adeline and Ribbon. Damn, that's ballsy. With all of that in mind, Volume 4, Chapter 5 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 4, Chapter 6, Forward Dedede Expedition Team. The chapter begins in the dense forest of southern Dreamland. King Dedede has set up an expedition team to explore the dangers of this unknown territory. They start rolling the camera in order to get this on live TV, with Walkie providing live commentary. All of a sudden, King Dedede starts getting eaten by a giant flower, but gets saved by Ku in the nick of time. Walkie then starts suffering the same fate, only to realize that it's Kirby who is eating him because he wants the mic ability. King Dedede scolds him and continues to scold him when he keeps fooling around. They do find mysterious big footprints that they believe to belong to that of Bigfoot, but it's the Kirby manga, so you know it's actually Kirby's doing. King Dedede finally comes upon some ancient ruins to explore, and Ku points out some more only for him to immediately know that it's Kirby, Rick, and Kine using the giant stone ability to pretend. Kirby starts to get bored and then plays TV producer, trying to make the show more spicy. He fakes a possession, sets Dedede on fire, freezes him, and painfully combines everyone to look like the Loch Ness Monster in silhouette. King Dedede gets so beaten up, Kirby takes a picture of him and calls it an alien encounter. Roll credits. Gag after gag after gag after gag. It just breathes incoherence in this one. Just another chapter of Kirby being a problem for the sake of Kirby being a problem. It just doesn't translate to anything that funny. Hell, this one just feels like it has no substance at all. It just exists. With all that in mind, Volume 4, Chapter 6 gets my rating of an F. Next up is Volume 4, Chapter 7, Super Power-Up Old Kirby. The chapter begins as a normal day starts in this universe. King Dedede is angrily chasing Kirby for eating all of his food. King Dedede expresses how tired he is of Kirby being this hyper all the time, and after seeing a bunch of elderly people, gets the idea that Kirby wouldn't be so hyper if he was old. King Dedede finds Mr. Tick-Tock's brother, T-Tick-Tock. T-Tick-Tock then spins his clock hands and then beats the years into Kirby, turning him into an elderly man. King Dedede starts teasing Kirby, but Kirby snaps right back, trying to inhale a hammer ability in order to get back at Dedede. Kirby tries to inhale Bonkers, but can't inhale all the way like he used to. He eventually does it and gets a croquet mallet instead of a hammer, but still successfully beats Dedede with it. As you'd predict, old Kirby is just as annoying as young Kirby, just for old people reasons instead of Kirby reasons. After realizing that old Kirby is more annoying than regular Kirby, the king says that where he went wrong is that we went in the wrong direction. He shouldn't have turned Kirby into an old man, he should have turned Kirby into a dumb stinky baby. T-Tick-Tock makes it so, only to very quickly realize he has to take care of the baby Kirby, ending the chapter. Bland, 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 bland. It's starting to get very tiresome that these chapters just resort to using the same jokes over and over and over again. Even though the chapter revolves around Kirby being old, what do we see old Kirby do that is that different from what Kirby usually does? He eats a lot, he's demanding, he sings horribly. These are all the same jokes done again and again in every Kirby Annoys Dedede chapter. It's tiring after reading 30 chapters of this. With all of that in mind, Volume 4 Chapter 7 gets my rating of an F. Next up is Volume 4 Chapter 8, Goodbye, King Dedede. The chapter begins with Kirby and King Dedede hanging out on a warm afternoon where they both decide to take their afternoon nap. Gooey decides that he wants to take a nap too and crawls into Kirby's mouth in order to do so. Kirby spits him out, so Gooey decides to crawl into Dedede's mouth instead. In his sleep, however, King Dedede swallows Gooey. The next day, King Dedede goes to the hospital complaining of stomach issues. The doctor shows the king the x-rays he took and points out the black mass. King Dedede misunderstands what the doctor is thinking. Instead of seeing that Gooey is going to be inside King Dedede until tonight, the king takes it that he has cancer and is going to die tonight. King Dedede starts sulking and reflecting on how much time he's wasted through his life and tries to think of how he's going to spend the last day. He tries to get into reading but ends up dozing off, wasting more time. The king then tries to exercise but wonders what worrying about his health is going to benefit him now. When Kirby and the others show up, King Dedede realizes just how much he's going to miss them. The king decides to spend his last day with his friend only to immediately be beat up by Kirby. King Dedede, shockingly enough, doesn't get mad and even treats Kirby to a feast and lets him sing. King Dedede even tells Poppy that he can succeed him after he dies, which just leaves Poppy more confused. King Dedede then realizes that if he dies tomorrow, he won't have a legacy for people to remember him by, so he decides to do something drastic. King Dedede then hears a cry for help and he jumps into action, trying to save a kid from drowning in the river. Meanwhile, Poppy goes to the hospital to see what's going on with Dedede, where the misunderstanding is cleared up to him. Back to the action, King Dedede tries to save the kid, but Kirby succeeds in doing it instead, leaving everyone impressed and the king to drown. All of a sudden, Gooey pops out of the king's stomach. Poppy then shows up and tells the king that he isn't going to die. King Dedede, about to fall down a waterfall, then begs for his life. In the nick of time, Kine catches the king in his mouth and saves him. The chapter ends with everyone glad that King Dedede will live after all. Though this chapter didn't have that many laughs in it, it sure as hell made up for it with it just being an entertaining character piece. King Dedede actually missing all of his friends and wanting to leave a legacy is actually an interesting bit of characterization for the king. I didn't expect a cancer mention in a piece of Kirby media, but fuck it, go off. With all of that in mind, Volume 4 Chapter 8 gets my rating of an A-. Next up is Volume 4 Chapter 9, The Haunting at Chilly Shrine? The chapter begins on another hot day in Dreamland. The gang decides to go to Chilly Shrine to go cool off in front of the eternal ice. As they chill, Kirby hands out some shaved ice to his friends, only to reveal that it was made from the eternal ice. Also, Gooey is licking it. Dude. Kirby. Really? After this, everyone at the shrine gets cursed. Poppy gets a deformed face, Rick's piss freezes in place, Jesus Christ! Coo's milkshake froze so they can't drink it. All horrible things to happen to a person. The ice shows up to get revenge on Dedede next and starts chilling his tummy so that he'll get the runs. Kirby and Gooey show up in order to get more shaved ice and find the ice demon. Kirby inhales him and, for whatever reason, freezes Dedede in an ice ball. They place the Dedede ice ball on the shrine and boom, curse lifted and chapter over. Did anything that constitutes a story really happen here? Kirby literally shows up, causes a problem, fucks off while everyone suffers, and then comes back and accidentally fixes it. What kind of a gag manga chapter is that? We get more horror here than comedy. Just a whole lot of nothing. With all of that in mind, Volume 4 Chapter 9 gets my rating of an F. Next up is Volume 4 Chapter 10, The Cursed Kirby Doll. The chapter begins with King Dedede and Poppy meeting with a hooded figure. He gives him a voodoo doll of Kirby and tells him that in order for it to work, it needs the tear of the person they want to control. They demonstrate with a Dedede voodoo doll, and Poppy almost takes out the king right there and then. King Dedede and Poppy take both dolls and plan to enact their plan on Kirby at the festival the next day. Unbeknownst to them, they drop the Dedede doll and it gets picked up by Mr. Frosty, who then uses it as a prize at the festival. At the festival, Kirby sees the Dedede doll and Mr. Frosty stand and goes to win it. Shoot down the doll and you win. As King Dedede finds Kirby and goes to make him cry, Kirby shoots his shot. He hits him and the king feels it. Kirby wins the doll and shows it off to the king. This is when King Dedede and Poppy realize that Kirby has the voodoo doll and they have to get it back. Kirby, being Kirby, is very rough with the doll, not realizing that it's hurting Dedede too. King Dedede gets desperate and tries to trade Kirby the voodoo doll of him for the Dedede doll. Gooey swoops in though and trades the Kirby doll for his lighter. Why does Gooey have a lighter? What was he planning on doing here? Desperate times call for desperate measures, and boy howdy have we already gotten desperate. Poppy does Dedede up to look like a life-size doll of himself. This surprisingly works as Kirby trades the voodoo doll for it. Poppy takes the voodoo doll and goes to bring it somewhere safe, but accidentally trips and loses the doll. Because it fell into an ice cream freezer, now the real Dedede is stuck and can't move. The other friends don't believe that it's actually a life-size doll, so they start pinching and prodding at him to get him to crack, just torturing the hell out of the king. Kirby starts crying and says he doesn't want the doll anymore, as Poppy finds the voodoo doll and returns to make sure the king is okay. Kirby takes the opportunity to take the voodoo doll back, continuing Dedede's torture, ending the chapter. This is one of the few times that Dedede endures torture and actually deserves it. Everything that happened to him in this chapter was what he fully intended on doing to Kirby, so the torture feels justified. It's not just Kirby being annoying for annoying's sake. It also makes sense for Kirby to be treating the doll roughly. He doesn't know that it's causing the real Dedede pain. He just thinks it's a doll. This is an example of a Dedede torture porn done right. I just wish it was a little funnier. With all of that in mind, Volume 4 Chapter 10 gets my rating of a B+. Next up is Volume 4 Chapter 11, Training in Secret Sweepstakes Techniques. The chapter begins with King Dedede losing another sweepstakes. King Dedede was trying to win a superhero transformation belt from a magazine and he, of course, lost. When King Dedede goes out to buy more postcards to send in, he sees that Paint Roller won the prize he wanted. Kirby reveals to the king that Paint Roller is a sweepstakes master, as they show him just how much he's won. He should go on Denpa Shonen's prize life. Just call him Nasubi. King Dedede pleads with Paint Roller to teach him their secrets. Paint Roller agrees, but only if they promise to see it through to the end. Paint Roller buys a lot of postcards to get them started. Before they start signing though, they must cleanse their body, bow deep at the postcards, and meditate, clearing your mind of the thought of winning. They then start to sign the postcards, but Paint Roller tells them not to rush their way through it, and to be creative with the message with neat handwriting. Why is it that when King Dedede hears creative, he sends in a ransom note? He gives them an example and says that the postcard needs to stand out since they get thousands of them. Soon enough, this becomes a calligraphy class as Paint Roller starts nitpicking every little thing. After finally getting some postcards that Paint Roller will accept, they wish each postcard good luck, and then use Paint Roller's lucky mailbox, which is located at the top of a perilous mountain. They climb the mountain, not without falling a few times, and make it up to the mailbox. After cleaning the mailbox and leaving it an offering, they are finally ready to put in the postcards one by one. Paint Roller guarantees they'll win a prize. Later, it seems that Kirby has won a sukiyaki meal set, and King Dedede still won nothing. King Dedede starts hastily signing postcards again, saying that it must be quantity over quality. Poppy then points out that the king never put his name or address on the postcards, finally explaining why he's never won anything. This is the first chapter in a while where I can actually say it was funny. I remember being a kid and entering all of those sweepstakes in order to win crazy prizes and the inevitable disappointment when I didn't win them. Do they even do sweepstakes anymore? I feel like that stuff came and went with the early 2000s. Honestly, just how much this joke got escalated was what really got me. When the mailbox was at the top of the mountain, that actually got a chuckle out of me. I didn't expect that. With all of that in mind, Volume 4, Chapter 11 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 4, Chapter 12, Legendary Teacher Kirby. The chapter begins in an alternate universe where the Kirby cast of characters are all in school. If I had a nickel for every time Dedede was a principal of a school in Kirby media, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but you already know the rest of the joke. Principal Dedede and Vice Principal Poppy see that the student body is getting out of control again. After Mr. Blocky quits his job, they must enlist the help of the most legendary teacher of them all, the legendary teacher, Mr. Kirby. Principal Dedede introduces the new teachers to this class of characters that couldn't care less. At first, Kirby does his usual Kirby shenanigans, just being generally annoying and not really understanding the assignment. Poppy starts to lose faith, but Dedede tells him to trust the process. Kirby then starts to make an inspirational speech about the value of education, only to make it about food again. The next day, the entire student body decides to boycott Kirby's class. Not even a single student shows up. Kirby is told that the students are all at the bank, just hanging out. Kirby shows up with a whole squadron of police and someone's mom? When Kirby decides to talk to them alone, he tries to inspire them enough to go back on their own, only for them to be forced back by a song and dance number performed by Kirby. Somehow, this saves the school, ending the chapter. It's all the same jokes. Kirby's loud. Kirby doesn't know what his goals are. Kirby eats a lot. Kirby sings bad. It's the same jokes every single time. You have a whole school setting to work with when it comes to jokes, and you just tell the same 4 jokes. They don't take advantage of the school setting at all. This very much could have been a normal Kirby chapter, and nothing would be different. At this point, I'm just craving more creative jokes. With all that in mind, Volume 4, Chapter 12 gets my rating of an F. Next up is Volume 4, Chapter 13, Kirby's Past and Future. The chapter begins with Kirby announcing that you can read the Kirby manga online. Oh my god, really? In Japan. Oh, not there. Kirby, Dedede, and Poppy reflect on how much they've changed in art style, including another joke about Volume 25. I'm just so curious to see what the hell happened in this volume to garner such scrutiny from its own author. They even reflect that they've been doing this manga for 25 years. We then get a look at how Hikawa does his manga. Even though most manga have gone completely digital, Hikawa continues to draw this manga completely analog because he really likes looking at the finished physical pages when he's done. They try to think of a way for the manga to grow, and we get this crazy intricate panel. Wow. Poor Hikawa. They then get into a discussion of how manga may be completely taken over by AI, which the author kinda hopes for. Agree to disagree, I guess. Kirby points out that he'd be out of a job then, and Hikawa shuts up. The chapter ends with an ad for Kirby Manga Mania. This is probably one of the most self-serving chapters of this manga yet. This whole chapter is Hikawa just talking to himself about his own manga and reflecting. That's cool and all, but we've already gotten this type of chapter in Volume 1 when they first came back to drawing it. It just feels like a retread. It does get me very curious about this very infamous Volume 25 where Hikawa claims his art style was at its worst. I just wish the time was taken to make an actual chapter instead of what really just boils down to a behind-the-scenes extra. With all of that in mind, Volume 4, Chapter 13 gets my rating of a D. That concludes Volume 4. Before we continue, we will have yet another presentation by our friends on the DUBASSES team. Enjoy.
Woohoo!
Looking good.
Let's go rescue Peaches!
That ain't her name. It's Princess Peach.
Just stay away, Peaches!
I told you it's Princess Peach.
Here I come, Peaches!
It's Princess Peach already!
At this point, let's just go with Peaches.
Leave him in the dust, Magnum Kirby!
I can't drive on an empty stomach.
Fair enough.
Okie dokie, I'm full of energy. Let's go!
Over the weight limit! You're disqualified!
You big dummy!
Welcome back everyone to our review of every chapter in Kirby Manga Mania. Last time we finished up Volume 4, so we're gonna jump right into Volume 5, but before we do, make sure to check out our merch store in the description below where you can buy our shirts, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. Without further ado, let's get to the review. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 1, A Foolproof Way to Beat the Summer Heat? The chapter begins with, yet again, another hot day. It's so hot that when King Dedede goes to the pool, there is no water left in there. One concussion later, King Dedede sees just how dried out Wispy Woods is. Jesus Christ, that's terrifying. The townspeople start begging King Dedede to do something about the heat when Kirby comes in to answer everyone's prayers. Kirby is now Water Kirby and is splashing water everywhere. Everyone gets super happy that Kirby is there to help them, but then Kirby, after getting super fired up, almost drowns the whole town. Wait, where's the rest of the chapter? That's it? Okay. This chapter was shockingly short. Like, we've had short chapters before, but this was only 10 pages, and most of them were big panels. Like, what is the story here? Everyone is hot and Kirby almost drowns everyone? Where's the jokes? Where's the story? Where's literally anything? It already had a sour taste in my mouth since it was another story about being too hot on a hot day, but then it just delivers nothing. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 1 gets my rating of an F. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 2, Kirby Dives into the World of Knowledge. The chapter begins with Kirby asking why the sky is blue. King Dedede and the others show up and the king tries to answer the question, only really saying that the sky is blue because it is. This question is bothering Kirby so much that he can't nap. Kirby then gets bit by a mosquito, leading him to question why mosquito bites itch so much. This leads to a chain of Kirby thinking of questions and needing to know the answers for them. King Dedede gets so frustrated by the amount of questions that he yells at Kirby, making him cry. King Dedede says he's sorry, and then Kirby questions why people cry when they're sad. Kirby then finally comes to his own conclusion that answers every single one of his questions. He concludes that ignorance is bliss and he shouldn't ask so many questions. That is the key to living free and easy. I feel like I'm repeating myself all the time. This chapter is just a whole lot of nothing too. I'm not out here requiring a deep story, but even as a gag manga, the jokes are starting to get a bit stale. I'm just reading this with such a blank face at this point. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 2 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 3, See How Much I Can Grow. The chapter begins with Kirby pondering the meaning of life. Wow, getting deep now, huh? Kirby starts telling the others about how he's longing to grow and experience the ups and downs of life instead of just doing the same happy things every day and staying the same age. King Dedede tries to talk Kirby out of wanting a normal life and growing up, telling the horror stories of real life. Stuff like tyrant bosses, backstabbing friends, housing crises, failing economies, the fourth Matrix movie. Everyone else encourages Kirby to follow his dreams. Kirby starts his grown-up journey by putting his toys away, brushing his teeth, and getting up in the morning by himself. Kirby starts to feel more adult, but King Dedede just mocks him. King Dedede actually says something profound, saying that no matter the age, you should live in the moment and enjoy life the best you can. That's what life's all about. I know a few people on Twitter that can learn that lesson. Kirby is apparently one of them, as he doesn't understand what the king means. The king asks him to look deep inside of himself and figure out what is important to Kirby. Kirby then realizes that he loves to eat yummy food, laugh lots, sing for fun, and sleep soundly. King Dedede congratulates Kirby, saying that that's the Kirby he knows, secretly thanking God that Kirby didn't decide to make himself grow and change, since the manga creator doesn't own the characters and wouldn't be able to do anything along those lines. This is a fourth wall joke that I can get behind. It's funny because the whole chapter isn't centered around it until it becomes the punchline at the very end. It's also pretty entertaining to see what Kirby considers the ups and downs of life, and to see how King Dedede rejects all of that. Honestly, I don't know which world I'd rather live in. Living in a world where everything is great and you get to live free and easy seems kind of boring. Either way, pretty good chapter. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 3 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 4, A Method for Making Up. The chapter begins with Kirby and King Dedede getting into a big fight. Kirby is upset because King Dedede keeps leaving him on red, but Kirby keeps sending King Dedede 300 texts a day. This results in Kirby and King Dedede no longer being friends with each other anymore. 1 month later, and King Dedede and Kirby still aren't talking. They won't even talk to people who are on the opposing side. This causes Kirby and Dedede to force people to choose sides. At the end of them gathering all of their friends, Kirby has 8 people on Team Kirby, and Dedede, even though he's the king of the entire kingdom, was only able to scrounge up 8 as well. They stare each other down for a while when Meta Knight walks by. Kirby and Dedede try to enlist him into one of their teams, but Meta Knight finds this entire fight stupid. Meta Knight proposes they settle this on the battlefield. Sword Kirby and King Dedede then fight it out, insulting each other the entire time. The fight ends up a draw as Kirby and King Dedede, having gotten their frustrations out, walk away from each other with their bond strengthened only for it to get immediately ruined by Kirby texting Dedede a million times. Finally, another Kirby chapter with an actual plot. The jokes are actually pretty funny. The whole argument being over their texting habits, it feels like we've reached a natural progression of a story with jokes along the way. This chapter is story first and gag second, and that's how I like it best here. Meta Knight is still my favorite character in this manga. Having him suggest a duel and having it work was awesome. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 4 gets my rating of an A+. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 5, Kirby's Song Changes the World. The chapter begins with King Dedede excitedly getting Kirby's attention. King Dedede tells him that in a celebrity magazine article, Kirby was named #1 amateur singer in Dreamland. Kirby gets so excited at this news that he decides to try and make singing his only passion and make it pro. King Dedede starts laughing at Kirby, revealing that the whole thing was a prank. Kirby gets so upset and embarrassed that he feels complete and utter despair. Adeline tries to comfort him when all of a sudden, he has a microphone in his hand and he feels the need to sing a song to heal his wounded heart. Everyone gets prepared by the usual Kirby singing, but instead, Kirby sings a beautiful song that relates to the masses. After he's done singing, Kirby starts to go home, but everyone stops him and tells him how great the song was and that they want to hear it again. Kirby just thinks that he's being pranked again, but they try to show him that this is no joke. He doesn't really get convinced, however, until Kirby actually signs for a major record label. Kirby gets so excited that this is for real life that when he's handed the microphone to sing his song again, he sings in his normal Kirby way. Kirby apparently belted out the full 14-minute 32-second song, and his contract was terminated immediately. This chapter actually subverted my expectations a bit. When I saw the title of the chapter, I assumed they were going to have Kirby still sing horrible, but have some weirdo record label person still like it and claim that it will change the world. I find it much funnier that Kirby actually sang well, and then it takes the world by storm, only for him to sing normal again at the end. Adds an interesting layer to the singing joke, showing that Kirby can sing, but his hyperactivity is what prevents him from singing well. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 5 gets my rating of a B+. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 6, King Dedede's Big Baby Transformation? This could either be kinda funny, or really disturbing. Please don't let this be fetishy. The chapter begins with Kirby making his own weird concoction of juice out of a bunch of random fruits and objects. King Dedede, out for a run, decides to inhale the juice through Kirby's window since he's so thirsty. The juice tastes so bad that it turns King Dedede into a baby. What the fuck? Kirby finds the baby and decides to take care of the little shit. Kirby meets up with Rick and Ku, where they also see King Dedede as the baby he is. King Dedede gets so shocked and pissed that they try to make him feel better by making funny faces. Kirby decides to raise the baby as his own, naming him Poncho. Kirby starts using his breath and inhale to throw Dedede up in the air. He actually starts to have fun, but then Kirby just straight up yeets the baby. Poppy and a bunch of the townspeople show up to see what's going on. King Dedede tries to get Poppy's attention, but none of them recognize the king. Quickly, the king becomes the center of attention, so much so that Kirby gets jealous and does this. They notice the king isn't wearing a diaper, so they go and get him one, as well as a binky and rattles. Kirby tries to sing the king to sleep, but his horrible singing only puts himself to sleep. King Dedede starts to get hungry and bothers Kirby to feed him. At first, Kirby doesn't know what he wants, but Ku figures it out for him. Then we get this cursed image of Kirby with tits. Rick and Ku tell him to stop fucking around and make him some formula. At first, it goes normally, but then Kirby makes another crazy concoction with anything he can find. It's fed to Dedede and, somehow, it turns Dedede back to normal. The chapter ends with King Dedede chasing Kirby and everyone else involved just being left confused. Well, it was definitely weird, but at least it wasn't fetishy. We did see Kirby with tits though, so I don't know, maybe someone's into that. I love how this chapter doesn't give a shit about how we got to the plot. The king drank something weird and then boom, he's a baby. Hell, even the minor characters are wondering what the hell this drink is that it could change someone's age if they drink it. This is definitely one of the stranger chapters in the manga, and once again, I wish it was funnier. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 6 gets my rating of a C. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 7, Kirby Hood Comes Calling? In another alternate timeline taking place in the Edo period of Japan, we are introduced to the chivalrous thief, Kirby Hood, who steals from the rich and gives to the poor. Of course, he gives junk and the food that he doesn't want, but he still gives. Rick, who seems to be some sort of authority, simultaneously wants to be Robin Hood but vows to arrest Kirby Hood at all costs. Kirby hears some commotion going on back at his house and sees what's going on. King Dedede, a debt collector, is trying to extort money out of Kirby's dad and sister, who for some reason in this universe are Lololo and Lalala. King Dedede almost takes Lalala as the debt, but Kirby dresses up as a girl and makes Dedede so uncomfortable that he leaves. Lololo and Lalala tell Kirby that they had to take out a loan because he eats them out of house and home. They start to despair, but Kirby says that he's confident Kirby Hood will come to the rescue. Later, King Dedede is reveling in all of the money when he gets a message telling him that Kirby Hood is there. Kirby Hood then starts inhaling all of the money. Poppy tries to prod him down with a stick, but Kirby Hood just eats it. Kirby Hood gets surrounded by King Dedede and Rick as he's trying to escape, but he uses a regular bomb to both blow up everyone around him and launch himself far away. The next morning, Lololo and Lalala wake up to a pile of gold, concluding it must have been the work of Kirby Hood. The chapter ends with Kirby's heart burning bright because of the good deed he did as he eats Lololo and Lalala out of house and home again. This chapter is an interesting retelling of the Robin Hood type story, but all of the jokes in the chapter just devolve into Kirby eats everything jokes. I know it's Kirby and his whole thing is eating, but as I've said 1,000 times before, This is one of the only jokes they tell. It's getting harder and harder to talk about this manga without repeating myself over and over and over again. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 7 gets my rating of a C-. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 8, Kirby Strikes It Rich? The chapter starts with Kirby seeing people waiting online at Castle Dedede. He asks what's going on, and Mr. Frosty tells him that they are online to get their New Year's allowance from the king. Kirby barges into the castle to get his allowance, but the king screams at him and tells him that he doesn't get any allowance. After a bit of whining, the king gives in and gives Kirby 5 cents. Kirby learns that Rick got more than him and he tries to hypnotize him into giving it to him. Obviously, it doesn't work. In the distance, Kirby hears a child complaining to his mom that he doesn't have a toy to play with. After a bit of coaxing, Kirby decides to give his 5-cent coin on a string to the kid. In return, the mom gives Kirby an orange. As Kirby starts thinking on how he could trade up the orange, he accidentally eats it as he thinks, leaving him only the orange peel. After walking around with it censoring his giant Kirby cock, Kirby gets an idea. Kirby uses his fire ability to create a bald spot on Ku's head and then puts the orange peel on it. Kirby demands a trade, but Ku says he doesn't want the orange peel. But Kirby ends up getting a few feathers off of Ku in exchange. Kirby then overhears a few guys saying their birdie broke and, sticking the feathers into Gooey, gives them that to play with as Kirby takes their badminton rackets. Kirby then finds some ants drowning and uses the paddles to save them. One of those ants happens to be the Ant Queen, and she makes sure they are properly rewarded by giving Kirby literal pots of gold. Kirby decides to use his newfound wealth to build him a whole castle. King Dedede sees the new castle and cannot believe his eyes. Kirby decides to give King Dedede his allowance and gives him 5 cents. Kirby then tries to teach the king the art of trading up, but it goes as well as you'd expect from the king. King Dedede drops his nickel in the river and finds a shoe. The shoe belongs to Jumper Shoot, which Dedede uses as an umbrella, who then leaves a leg hair with the king. They end the day with the leg hair, which somehow lands on Kirby's face. Kirby then sneezes so much that it topples his entire castle over. Kirby then takes this as the leg hair turning into a pile of rubble, and the chapter ends with Kirby suggesting they start over, but King Dedede says that he doesn't have any more money. Okay, this one was actually pretty good. The antics of how Kirby and King Dedede would trade up their nickel was pretty funny, especially the one with Dedede. Once again, a good King Dedede and Kirby dynamic. Kirby wasn't too annoying, and the king was just the right amount of greedy for me to laugh at his misfortune. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 8 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 9, Kirby Becomes King. The chapter begins with Kirby playing soccer with his friends when he wonders where King Dedede is. Chili tells Kirby that the king is sick and he hears it's very serious. At the castle, we see the doctor checking over the king, and he diagnoses him with the common cold. King Dedede insists that it must be more serious than that, and then lists off all the symptoms of a common cold. Kirby bursts in to see King Dedede and also potentially steal a fruit basket. King Dedede starts feeling delirious and starts thinking that he's going to die. He starts to wonder what will happen if he dies and who will rule Dreamland. He then starts envisioning a civil war over who gets to rule next. A true period of warring states. King Dedede decides he needs to name a successor and decides to name Kirby. The next day, King Dedede feels better already and is taking a stroll with Poppy. They then hear of the news that Kirby was named as Dedede's successor. Of course, Kirby, being his usual self, is already acting like he's king. It all starts to get to his head, hiring bodyguards, getting gifts from the people, and getting compliments on his horrible singing. Kirby then decides to change his name to something more regal, so when you pop in Kirby Superstar Ultra into your Nintendo DS, you are actually playing Prince Kirby Von Golden Star Royal Lemon Tea Superstar Ultra. After showing off trying to live a more noble lifestyle, King Dedede tells Kirby he's going to show him what his kingly duties are to see if he can handle him. King Dedede patrols the skies, listens to the needs of his people, runs away from the needs of his people, does strength training, gets hurt during strength training, and makes sure everyone in the castle is doing their jobs. Kirby sees just how hard Dedede works, mostly because the plot demands it, and this makes Kirby not want to do it anymore and to leave it to Dedede, even though he was finally warming up to the idea of having a successor. This chapter was a mixed bag. The stuff between Kirby and Dedede when he was sick was pretty good. King Dedede thinking of a civil war in his delirium was actually a pretty good bit and a great setup to naming Kirby his successor. When we got to Kirby relishing in being the next king is when it kinda turned into its typical gag after gag stuff. The end when King Dedede was showing kingly duties brought it back up though, and having Kirby say the same thing as Dedede when he tried to get him out of the kingship was a nice full circle joke. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 9 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 10, Chase the Big Scoop. The chapter begins with King Dedede being super excited because he finally, after so long, solved the ring puzzle. He's so proud of it that it becomes front page news. The denizens of Dreamland start complaining about King Dedede doing this, and apparently he does this with every little achievement he makes. He even took over the funnies. Garfield, but it's Dedede. That's a new meme format. Kirby decides he could come out with a better newspaper than what Dedede puts out. For example, he tells the story of a son and a mother who were separated for 3 years, finally being reunited. I mean, Kirby swallowed the mom, so it's not as wholesome as it sounds. Jesus Christ, Kirby. Kirby goes on the hunt for the next big scoop for their new paper. This leads to a tirade of Kirby going around and taking newsworthy stories and trying to sensationalize them. For example, Bobu has triplets, which they find happy news. Kirby then turns triplets into centuplets. 100 babies! They then interview Broom Hatter, who claims to have been sweeping for over 40 years. He swept 3 stadiums worth of leaves, so Kirby naturally buries Broom Hatter in 3 stadiums worth of leaves, believing him to be happy to do it all again. King Dedede then shows up and says that he won his first ever raffle prize and wants that on the paper. Kirby lets it in, but gives it a very small section of page. It almost looks like a want ad. Kirby tells the king that he needs a way more exciting story to reach the front page. King Dedede then tells the story of how a little flower is blooming and he's been protecting it from getting run over by Wheelie. Kirby continues to sensationalize getting the king run over by multiple wheelies and creating a typhoon and being struck by lightning and crushed by rocks and whatever else can torture Dedede. When they come out with the article, it's more so about the flower than the king's heroic tale. The editor-in-chief decides to print a story of King Dedede bullying Kirby and even stepping down because of it. Did King Dedede just get cancelled? This results in the newspaper getting absolutely no readers since everyone knows it's bullshit now. Stuff just happens, and yet nothing happens. That's this chapter. Not funny, didn't laugh, super predictable. We've seen this plot a million times before in many other pieces of media. I'm tired. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 10 gets my rating of an F. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 11, Kirby Musashi Appears. Once again, in an alternate universe that takes place in the distant past of Japan, Kirby takes the role of the brave fencer Musashi, known for his swordsmanship and apparently his appetite as well. Meanwhile, at another restaurant, table flipper Kojiro, who is played by King Dedede, is a mean, picky food critic who has put multiple restaurants out of business. After Musashi Kirby berates Kojiro Dedede for his messy, wasteful actions, Kojiro Dedede gets mad and challenges Kirby to a duel. The fated battle will soon commence. The duel is overseen by Chef Kawasaki, who claims that whoever eats the most food is the winner. Kojiro Dedede questions why this isn't a sword duel, and he is told that since food started this fight, it should end it. Of course, with Kojiro Dedede being a picky eater, he eats all of his food way slower than Kirby does, just inhaling mouthfuls upon mouthfuls of food. Kojiro Dedede is duly defeated and Musashi Kirby is world-renowned, even being hired by a lord to be within his courtship, only to be promptly kicked out for eating all of his food. I'd probably appreciate this more if I knew more about the story of Musashi. The only thing I know about Musashi is that it had a very critically acclaimed PS1 game. Other than that, any reference to the original work is lost on me. Eating, eating, eating. That's all this manga talks about. Yawn! Sorry, my stupid American brain is too dumb and stinky and obsessed with burgers to be cultured enough for this chapter. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 11 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 12, The Gentlemen Thieves of Dreamland. Are we going to get a Kirby and Persona 5 crossover? I know it's Phantom Thieves, but just let me dream. The chapter begins with Kirby and his friends going to a pear orchard to pick some pears. When they get there though, they can't find a single pear in the orchard. They learn from an orchard worker that every single fruit was taken by King Dedede. We see King Dedede drowning in pleasure with all of the pears that he has. Kirby, looking through the window, vows that King Dedede will not get away with this. When he sees a movie with Arsène Lupin in it, Kirby gets an idea. See? Arsène! Persona 5 crossover! I mean, he looks a little different, but he's got the spirit. Later, the crew arrives at Kirby's as he unveils his idea. He is now Arsène Kirby, and he will steal all of the fruit back from the gluttonous King Dedede. ChuChu says it sounds like fun, and everyone else goes on board. Becoming the Gentlemen Thieves of Dreamland. They issue a calling card to King Dedede saying that they will pay him a visit. King Dedede already sets up preparations within the castle to make sure the fruit will not be stolen. He hires Inspector Mr. Frosty, who has put 100 officers throughout the castle, and Chef Kawasaki puts the fruit in a refrigerated safe. Outside the castle, the Gentlemen Thieves try to think of a plan. Kirby wants to be Santa, but that's too obvious. ChuChu goes to distract the guards out in front with her feminine wiles. She gets them to sniff a flower that she apparently soaked in chloroform. Okay. And the officers go night-night. They put on the officers' clothes in order to disguise themselves. They come face to face with Inspector Mr. Frosty, and even though Kirby almost got them caught by combining himself with Rick and Kine, where's Rick's head? They don't get caught. At precisely midnight, the lights go out and a note is put on the safe saying the fruit was stolen. King Dedede cannot see how this is possible and opens the safe to check to see that the fruit is in its place, until Kirby inhales all of the fruit in that moment, actually tricking the king. Kirby swallows the fruit for now and they make their escape. They end up getting spotted and chased after. Kirby creates a smoke screen, but they won't let up. Kirby goes to be the decoy as the others get away, doing a callback to the Secret Agent chapter. Kirby gets caught up at a dead end and grabbed by Dedede. When King Dedede turns the culprit around, he sees that it's his face, confusing Dedede for long enough for Kirby and the others to get away. King Dedede vows to catch those gentlemen thieves and get his revenge. The chapter ends with Kirby and the others trying to find the fruit that Kirby swallowed among the piles and piles of junk. Finally, a great chapter. I really like these ones that have Kirby and friends actually working towards a goal while having comedic gags along the way. Much like the Secret Agent chapter, this one actually had some clever twists and turns. I really like Kirby tricking Dedede by having him open the safe. That was both clever and funny. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 12 gets my rating of an A+. Next up is Volume 5, Chapter 13, The Line, the Pudding, and Kirby. We begin this chapter with the end, with Kirby running away with a bag, making sure no one followed him so he can finally have what he has been working for so long. We flash back 100 days. Kirby sees a very long line leading up to Chef Kawasaki's restaurant and wonders what's going on. Rick tells him that Chef Kawasaki is giving away a new dish called Premium Pudding, which is so good it's worth waiting hours and hours online for. Kirby sees King Dedede having some and wants some of his own. Kirby tries to take some of Dedede's but is told to wait in line like everyone else. Kirby gets to the back of the line and daydreams about inhaling everyone in front of him, but stops himself because it would be unfair to the others. Unfortunately, the pudding is sold out for the day, so he has to try again another time. This leads to a series of events that have Kirby waiting online, almost getting the pudding, but then getting distracted by either ice cream, dancing, etc., and always missing his chance to get some of the premium pudding. After 100 days, Kirby finally makes it to the front of the line and gets the last cup of pudding. Kirby runs away when Rick and Coo try some of his. Determined not to share his prize, Kirby finally eats the pudding and finishes it much quicker than he would have wanted, wondering if the pudding was really worth all of this effort. Out of energy, he falls into a blissful sleep. Honestly, I didn't hate this one. Seeing Kirby go through the trial day after day to beat his own distractions so he could get the object he desired most, only to wonder if it was worth all this waiting in the first place, seems much more metaphorical and philosophical than I was anticipating this gag manga to get. This is some good writing here. Hell, the fact that Kirby decided not to be annoying to the other patrons just to get what he wants shows a little semblance of character growth. From what we've seen in previous chapters, I know things will go back to the status quo with Kirby, but it was refreshing to see a more down-to-earth chapter of this manga. With all of that in mind, Volume 5, Chapter 13 gets my rating of an A. We have now made it through Volume 5 of Kirby Manga Mania. We only have one volume to go, but before we do, how about another intermission by our friends at DUBASSES?
Hiya, Knuckle Joe!
Kirby! Oh no, he'll inhale me!
You don't need to worry. I won't copy you anymore.
You won't?
There's no need. I trained in the mountains to finally master the fighter ability moves for myself.
No way!
Sorry for all the trouble. I won't bother you again. So long!
Wait, don't go! Don't say that! Please, copy me!
How do you do, Waddle Doo?
Kirby! Oh no, he'll inhale me!
No way. I'd never do something so rude.
Huh?
Have you lost weight? You need to make sure you get enough to eat. Also, please take a bath every day because I'm a clean freak.
Hurry up and copy the poor thing!
Welcome back everyone to our review of every chapter in Kirby Manga Mania. Last time we finished up Volume 5, so we're going to jump right into the final volume in the series, Volume 6. But before we do, make sure to check out our merch store in the description below where you can buy our shirts, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. Without further ado, let's get to the review. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 1, King Dedede's Secret. The chapter begins with Kirby doing a nighttime warp star stroll through Dreamland when he finds King Dedede digging a hole. King Dedede then throws a body-sized bag into the hole and buries it, smiling as he does. Kirby, recalling crime shows that he's seen on TV, believes he just saw King Dedede hide the evidence of a murder. The next day, King Dedede's in as good a mood as ever, while Kirby is in a sour mood, seeing Dedede as a horrible villain. Kirby starts acting strangely towards King Dedede, getting kinda scared and worked up every time he's around him, to the point where Kirby can't hold it in anymore and begs the king to turn himself in. Kirby admits he saw King Dedede bury something and tells him to admit to his crimes. This is when King Dedede brings him to the burial site to reveal what he buried, a mattress that he peed on in the middle of the night. The chapter ends with Kirby being happy that King Dedede isn't a murderer, and King Dedede being humiliated that everyone in Dreamland now knows that he wet the bed. Though this chapter was very short, it actually was the perfect length for what it was. The gags didn't overstay their welcome, most of them were pretty funny, and the punchline of it being a wet mattress instead of a dead body was something I was not expecting. All in all, a good enough chapter. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 1 gets my rating of an A-. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 2, Taking a Trip? Take Kirby! The chapter starts with King Dedede going up to Poppy in the castle and showing him that he won a Dreamland hot spring trip for 2 in a raffle. Insanely happy that he finally has a vacation, he wonders who he's going to take. King Dedede shows everyone and asks who wants to go with him. Of course, Kirby wants to go, but the king ignores him, asking if Ribbon or Adeline want to go. Unfortunately, they already have plans. Kirby already packs up, but King Dedede says that he specifically isn't invited because he knows that he'll just ruin the trip. Kirby then resorts to drastic measures. He makes his face look more like the cute game Kirby in order to convince him to take him. It almost gets the king, but he powers through, sticking to his guns. This is when Kirby goes crazy. Kirby has a campaign tour, book series, rigs the horoscope, tries hypnosis, and even tries blackmail to get the king to take Kirby. Of course, none of it works. King Dedede makes his decision to take Poppy with him, leaving Kirby frustrated. Kirby ends up working at the hot springs that they're vacationing to and even throws a tantrum to let him go, even though, as Poppy points out, he's already here. Honestly, not the direction I thought this chapter was gonna go, and I'm glad it didn't go the cliche route. Usually with plots like these, either the king would embellish goods and favors out of others to take advantage of them, wanting to go on the trip only for it to come crashing down at the end. This was more focused on Kirby being his hyperactive childlike self, going nuts over going on this trip, and it was kind of a breath of fresh air to not get a cliched plot. Things seem to be looking up. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 2 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 3, Somebody Stop Kirby! The chapter begins with Kirby screaming from the distance for help as King Dedede is taking a stroll. Kirby runs past Dedede, begging for him to stop him. The king gets confused as to what Kirby is up to, and apparently Kirby started running and forgot how to stop. King Dedede starts to explain how to stop, but realizes it's harder to explain than he thought. The other denizens of Dreamland try to stop Kirby, but get hit like bowling pins. King Dedede decides that he will stop at nothing to stop Kirby, and allows Kirby to run straight into him. Kirby comes to and realizes that he has stopped running, thanks to the king's efforts. Unfortunately for the king, he has now started running and is unable to stop. Kirby, being the hero he is, sits down and eats Wispy's apples as King Dedede screams for help. This chapter seems like a slap-together idea. It's just so absurd that I wonder how you even come up with a chapter like this. I'm flabbergasted. Do you see how short the description of this chapter was? Like, how do I even review this one? The answer is apparently I don't. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 3 gets my rating of a C-. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 4, Kirby Stops Eating? The chapter starts with Kirby looking like death. King Dedede asks what's wrong, and Rick says that he's fasting. Kirby is fasting? Holy shit. He's even fasted for 1 whole hour and plans on fasting the whole week. Adeline asks Kirby why he's fasting, but he doesn't want to explain it at the moment, probably because it's the punchline. Some denizens eat food in front of Kirby, and Kirby gets so mad he inhales them, hoping that doesn't count as eating. Kirby tries to empty his mind, but all it does is fill it with more food. Kirby tries to meditate under a waterfall and ends up drinking some of the water, hoping water doesn't count as food either. Wouldn't you know it, Kirby actually fasted for a whole week. He doesn't seem too good either, straight up almost losing his mind. Kirby reveals that the reason he did all of this is because there is a new restaurant opening up nearby, and with an all-you-can-eat buffet that only has a 3-minute time limit. Kirby wanted his stomach to be empty enough to be able to eat as much food as possible within those precious 180 seconds. As punishment for making them worry so much about his well-being, everybody force-feeds Kirby, breaking his fast. This chapter actually got a few chuckles out of me. The running gag of Kirby asking if a certain action he did counts as eating food was a pretty funny bit that made me chuckle each time. I wish the punchline to the joke was a little funnier, but honestly, I don't know what else I'd expect from Kirby. Having the chapter end with everyone turning against Kirby is a nice change of pace though. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 4 gets my rating of an A-. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 5. Do you like compliments? The chapter begins with Kirby essentially giving a TED talk about how much he respects King Dedede. He compliments him a ton, especially on his ability to forgive. Of course, this is all a ploy to get on the king's good side so he doesn't get mad at him for breaking his windows. Amazingly enough, this actually works. After returning to his friends to tell them that they're not in trouble, King Dedede sneaks up behind Kirby and asks him to compliment him again. Kirby does it once again, talking about how important King Dedede is, and King Dedede relishes in the compliments once again. That night, while Kirby is trying to sleep, King Dedede barges into his house begging to be complimented again. Kirby gets up and, instead of giving him compliments, gives King Dedede the business. Not only did he point out that he's a self-proclaimed king, but also says how tiny of a heart he has and that he wastes money, shows off, tells dad jokes, and scares away girls. Kirby then realizes that he got a bit carried away and apologizes for what he said. That's when King Dedede relishes in the lecture he got from Kirby and begs for him to keep doing it, starting the cycle anew. Kirby is now cursed to be chased forever by King Dedede wanting more lectures. Well, this was a twist. It's very rare that we see a chapter where Kirby's misdeeds leads him to get punished instead of the other way around. Must be opposite day. It's great seeing Kirby finally suffer some sort of consequence for his actions, instead of always getting away with being a menace. Also, is King Dedede okay? Kirby tells him all this stuff and King Dedede says he couldn't agree more? Bro, you need a therapist? Maybe he did have a traumatic childhood like that one episode of Kirby Right Back At You said. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 5 gets my rating of a B+. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 6, A Picnic with Adeline. The chapter begins with Kirby going on a picnic with Adeline, almost like that's the title of the chapter. There are a lot of rice balls that Adeline made to share with Kirby. Unfortunately, Adeline forgot the drinks, so she goes to get them and tells Kirby not to start without her. Kirby shockingly restrains himself. King Dedede shows up and takes a bit of a rice ball. Kirby beats him up for doing so, and when he turns around, everyone is taking a rice ball, even Meta Knight. The hell, guys? Kirby sees just how few rice balls are left and vows to protect the rest, but gets attacked from above by Bronto Burt, and even below by Molly. Wow, wasn't expecting a Kirby and the Amazing Mirror enemy to show up. Kirby overhears a passing Cappy mother and her children talking. The kid starts whining that Kirby's rice balls look so good and that they want one. Kirby, being the good Samaritan he is, reluctantly gives a rice ball to each of the kids, leaving only one rice ball remaining. Kirby tries to stay positive, saying that he plans on sharing this rice ball with Adeline. Kirby immediately loses the rice ball, having it roll down a hill and into the water. When Kirby shows up to the lake, he sees a blipper eating the last rice ball. Adeline finally shows up and sees the empty rice ball box. Adeline gets angry and says that she'll never make rice balls for Kirby again, and she leaves in a huff. Kirby, though sad, smiles thinking about how happy everyone else looked while eating the rice balls, growing a little bit more as a person. These chapters are definitely getting much better and not just recycling tired tropes over and over. I also like how Kirby is actually starting to grow as a person. Kirby in the previous volumes would have actually inhaled all of the rice balls and tried to cover it up rather than being the unlucky one. This makes Kirby a much more enjoyable character to be around while still keeping the chapter funny. I hope we continue to see chapters like these in the future. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 6 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 7, Kirby's Doting Parent Diary? The chapter begins with Dynablade looking over the eggs in a nest. All of a sudden, a giant gust of wind caused by Kirby, Ku, and Kine blow the entire nest over, causing Dynablade to lose her eggs. Sort of lucky for the eggs, the nest landed inside of Kirby's mouth. Kirby starts playing with the eggs by wearing them as a hat, painting them, and juggling them. Ku, being, the bird, tells him to stop screwing around with the eggs. Kirby decides to take care of them by keeping them in his tummy and pretending to be pregnant. All of a sudden, as Kirby is singing to them, the egg starts moving and they hatch within Kirby. Kirby starts taking care of them by feeding them and tearing off Rick's fur and Ku's feathers to keep the chicks warm until their feathers come in. Days later, not only have the baby chicks grown feathers, but they've copied a lot of Kirby's mannerisms, teaching them how to fly like Kirby does, how to eat, how to ask for seconds, and even how to sing. King Dedede thinks it looks neat and tells Kirby he wants one. Kirby refuses and the birds shit all over Dedede. Nice. This starts a chain reaction of the chicks putting themselves in danger, only for Kirby to take them out of danger and, as a result, putting someone else in danger. It also causes Kirby to take drastic measures to keep the chicks safe, like inhaling an entire lake. Did Kirby just commit fish genocide? Throwing Dedede's castle away and inhaling all of the dangerous denizens of Dreamland. All of a sudden, Dynablade shows up and finally finds her babies. The chicks go to fly back to their mama, but Kirby doesn't let them at first. Ku convinces him to let them go to their real mama, and they go their separate ways. Everyone lived miserably ever after, with Kirby losing his kids and getting ugly replacements, and Dynablade having to deal with her chick Kirby hybrids. Though this chapter wasn't as good as the others in this volume have been, it still wasn't the horribly repetitive schlock we got before. Though we hit all of the cliche story beats that a story like this would hit, it did have a few chuckles along the way. The ridiculousness of Kirby just yeeting the castle to space, and also Dynablade wondering what the hell Kirby taught her kids were both very good punchlines that got a chuckle out of me. Overall, it was a good chapter. Nothing great, but good. With all that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 7 gets my rating of a B+. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 8, Disaster, a get-well visit from Kirby? The chapter begins with Poppy telling everyone that King Dedede is in the hospital. He had to get surgery to get his appendix taken out. Kirby decides that everyone should go visit the king in the hospital, but it ends up that only Kirby and Gooey want to go. At the hospital, we see King Dedede is very lonely until Kirby and Gooey show up. Poppy tells them that they can't get the king too uppity, or else his wound may open back up. This leads to a series of events that keep making King Dedede laugh, like Gooey getting stuck in a jar only to come out looking like this, having him watch slapstick comedy on TV, and Kirby and Gooey unintentionally doing a slapstick routine of their own. After more and more slapstick gags between Kirby and Gooey, once again, not intentional, just their idiocy creating these situations, King Dedede laughs so hard that he has to stay in the hospital for an extra week due to the reopened wound, ending the chapter. You can probably already guess how I feel about this gag-centric Dedede torture porn chapter. It's a whatever one. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 8 gets my rating of a C. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 9, Ninja Kirby. Yada 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 yada, alternate universe, yada yada, ancient Japan, boom, ninjas. We see Kirby and King Dedede doing ninja training, Dedede taking it seriously, and Kirby, of course, not. Kirby gets bored of training, so him and the king go to do the real deal. In this tower, there is a secret scroll with a forbidden ninja technique. Kirby gets them immediately caught and they have to run away from the guards. King Dedede drops caltrops behind them in order to slow down the enemies, and Kirby puts them in front of them for Dedede to step on. Kirby then comes up with the perfect escape plan. Give Dedede a bomb that will explode and launch him into a direction very fast. Kirby then walks in disguised as a woman looking for secret scrolls, which leads to both Kirby and Dedede getting caught. Kirby and Dedede dislocate their joints to escape their restraints. I don't want to think about the anatomy of Kirby and why he's able to do this. After some sneaking around, Kirby finds the secret scroll, which ends up being sheet music. Kirby sings it, everyone agreeing that Kirby singing should be a forbidden technique forever. With all that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 9 gets my rating of a D. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 10, Who's Happier? The chapter begins with King Dedede receiving a package from the mail and then getting immediately scolded by Poppy for mail order shopping again. King Dedede states that this one is special. He ordered a happiness pendant, a necklace you wear that will make your life happier. King Dedede goes outside to show it off to everybody, only to realize that Kirby has one too. This ignites a competition in the two of them to see who can come out the happiest after wearing this pendant. From here on, predictably, Kirby gets a good luck streak and King Dedede gets a bad luck streak. Hey, is that Nightmare Wizard? King Dedede goes outside to see just how happy Kirby is, but realizes he's not wearing the pendant anymore. Kirby apparently gave it to Gooey a while ago. King Dedede takes this opportunity to try to hog all of the good luck for himself, and even tries to create bad luck for Kirby. It becomes very apparent though that the good fortune that Kirby has been having the whole time has more so to do with Kirby's attitude towards things rather than actual good luck. King Dedede gets down in the dumps again, and Kirby asks him what does make him happy. The king starts listing things that he could have that would make him happy, but Kirby corrects him, saying that Ku told him these wise words. Happiness isn't about wishing for things you don't have, it's about finding happiness in what you do have. Wow. Is that a moral? The chapter ends with Kirby saying that King Dedede would find happiness in having a friend like him, causing King Dedede to chase him. I never expected this gag manga to actually have a profound moral in one of their stories. Not only does this chapter teach that happiness is a matter of perspective, but that you'll never find happiness if you just focus on what you don't have. Honestly, I know a lot of adults that need to learn this lesson, myself included. I gotta give this chapter props for being meaningful and funny. With all that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 10 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 11, Fight Off the Alien. Another alternate universe story. This time it takes place in a sci-fi setting instead of ancient Japan finally. We see King Dedede and Poppy on a spaceship flying towards an unknown planet to hopefully inhabit. When they touch land, they go to explore and find a Kirby alien that is starving. The king brings him on the ship to eat their food so he won't die of starvation. After eating his meal, the Kirby alien falls asleep. The king and Poppy take this opportunity to explore the planet some more where they find another spaceship. When they board the ship, they see the crew is completely missing. They watch the last video log they recorded and see that the crew has run out of their 10-year supply of food, thanks to the round one. The crew will be wiped out soon enough. King Dedede and Poppy get suspicious on who this round one could be and get an emergency alert over their walkie from their crew. King Dedede and Poppy rush back to see all of their food is gone and that the alien is eating the crew members as well. Kirby then chases the king and Poppy in order to eat them as well, being drawn by the smell of the king's stinky breath. Kirby opens his mouth to reveal this terrifying frame. It turns out the extra mouths are actually the other crew the king saw. Turns out they are so hungry too that they want to eat the king. The chapter ends with the narrator proclaiming that planet Kirby is one of the most dangerous planets in the universe. Who knew this manga was going to try horror next? Honestly, it didn't do too bad. We actually didn't get a lot of gags in this one until Kirby started chasing the king and Poppy. Even then, the gags were equal parts funny and equal parts terrifying. All in all, this was a very creative chapter that blended comedy and horror pretty nicely. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 11 gets my rating of an A. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 12, Who's the Most Dangerous Man? This chapter begins with Galbo introducing himself as the most dangerous man in all of Dreamland. He strives to live the most risky life of all denizens of Dreamland. He decides to crawl into Kirby's mouth while he's sleeping, lasting 3 seconds before jumping out, thinking he can be inhaled at any moment. Kirby wakes up and asks Galbo if he wants to play. Galbo agrees, saying he knows all types of risky games like Rubber Band Tug of War. Galbo ends up losing as Ribbon and King Dedede show up. Galbo immediately falls for Ribbon and wants to show her how badass he is. Oh my god, he's the chosen. Galbo decides to rip an old blade clean off a box cutter, a risky move indeed. Kirby decides to do a risky task all his own and opens up a shaken soda bottle. He also washes his face but opens his eyes for a second to find the hot water handle with soap still on his face. Oh my god, I think I'm gonna faint. Kirby is going completely insane now. He starts taking a test with a mechanical pencil with only 1 stick of lead left at half length, filling his thermos with soda instead of the school-approved tea, and not bringing his handkerchief to cover his mouth during a fire drill, and even not wiping away the eraser bits after using an eraser. He's a psychopath, I'm telling you. Galbo admits defeat and deems Kirby the most dangerous man in Dreamland. King Dedede, not wanting to be one-upped, decides to risk eating udon noodles while wearing a white shirt. Of course, it was impossible for him not to suffer the dire consequences of his actions. The chapter ends with Kirby warning kids not to chase too many thrills. Though this one wasn't so creative in the story department, I would be lying if I said the jokes weren't funny. It's pretty funny having all these mundane risks being treated as risky as climbing a mountain without any equipment. I don't know, just tickled my particular funny bone, I guess. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 12 gets my rating of an A-. Next up is Volume 6, Chapter 13, Pipopo Rangers. The chapter starts with Kirby enjoying an average day in Dreamland when all of a sudden, he gets a call from Chief Dedede to assemble the Dream Rangers. Kirby dines and dashes in order to make it to the meeting in time. At the castle, Chief Dedede has assembled all of the Dream Rangers except for Kirby, who got lost on the way because the secret base was hard to find. Chief Dedede tells the Rangers about a new supervillain going around causing trouble, Wispy Woods. Wispy Woods is giving anyone who passes by apples. This doesn't sound so bad until you realize the apples actually turns people into his henchmen if they eat them. Sunglasses included. We see Wispy Woods continuing to enact his evil plan as the Dream Rangers arrive, taking up so many panels to introduce themselves that Wispy even comments on it. Kirby goes to fight all of Wispy's henchmen, but Ku reminds him that they are innocent people that are being controlled. They offer them apples, and Kirby, of course, eats a bunch of them, turning him against the Rangers. Kirby starts beating up his friends when they remind him of the good times, and even give him a microphone to sing and remember the vow they made to protect the world when they did karaoke that one time. Not only did Kirby singing free him of Wispy's curse, but also snapped all of his henchmen out of it too. The Dream Rangers go to finish Wispy off, but he grows giant and starts to grab everyone with his roots. Kirby also grows giant using his balloon power and knocks Wispy over. They take the opportunity to do a super special awesome chocolatey fudge coated mega super move on Wispy. The explosion was so big that Wispy gets obliterated and our heroes get burnt to a crisp. The chapter ends with the narrator proclaiming the day saved, but there is an even greater force out there dispelling evil all over the land. Mr. X. Who is Mr. X? Could it be Dark Matter? Nightmare Wizard? Necrotius? Nah, it's just Poppy. Though I'm not a huge fan of the Power Rangers, I didn't feel like I had to be in order to appreciate this chapter. Having Wispy be the villain of the what-if scenario this time instead of Dedede was a nice breath of fresh air. Hell, the story even had twists, turns, and laughs all throughout. Overall, a great chapter. Hope to see more like it in the future. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 13 gets my rating of an A+. Finally, last up is Volume 6, Chapter 14, My Hammer is My Friend. The chapter begins as we get to look at King Dedede as a baby. Not turned into a baby, but actually when he was a baby. King Dedede cried and cried and cried no matter what the Waddle Doos did. When they gave Dedede his hammer though, he stops crying and starts having fun. It becomes pretty clear that the hammer becomes a sort of security blanket for the king. The head Waddle Doo, you can tell because he has a mustache, gets concerned because the hammer is the king's only friend. Poppy gets invited over and invites the king to go bug catching with him, showing the king and Poppy's first meeting. As they're outside, King Dedede gets scared when bugs start flying near him. King Dedede is set on going home and becomes a difficult child as Poppy starts to despair for Dreamland's future. All of a sudden, a Gobchomplin grabs Poppy and starts eating him. King Dedede goes to run away to get help, but he starts to hear his hammer start talking to him. The hammer tells him to stand up and fight, giving Dedede the confidence to whack the Gobchomplin as hard as he possibly can. He hits it so hard that it spits Poppy right out, giving Dedede the confidence to be a hero and a courageous king. We then see King Dedede wake up in present day. Kirby comes by and asks the king to play battle with him. King Dedede agrees and goes to grab something from his closet. At the arena, it is revealed that King Dedede has a very tiny hammer, the original one from his childhood. The chapter ends with them about to battle. What the fuck? This chapter was amazing! I'm not even kidding, this is the last one we have to go over and it's the best one out of them all. Just giving backstory to King Dedede and Poppy and giving huge meaning to his hammer is so cool. It actually tugged my heartstrings a little. Wow. With all of that in mind, Volume 6, Chapter 14 gets my rating of an A+. And that is the end of Volume 6. And before we move on to the final ratings, I would like to have one more intermission by the amazing crew over at DUBASSES.
I drew this Kirby with my left hand. This Kirby was drawn by Ishizaki, my editor. This Kirby was drawn by my assistant.
Hey, your assistance is better than yours!
Ouch! Gritty comic style. Shoujo style. Live action.
The live action one looks entertaining.
You gotta be kidding.
With that, 74 chapters and over 100 pages of script later, we have concluded reviewing every single chapter of Kirby Manga Mania to date. So how does this Kirby manga stack up as a piece of Kirby media? Unfortunately, this manga is very much a mixed bag. Sometimes chapters are so short that they barely do anything at all, sometimes the chapters are just gag after gag after gag with no substance to it whatsoever, and sometimes the chapters are wildly creative character pieces with a rich story and funny gags. The quality is very inconsistent, but it's nowhere near bad at all. I just wish I could say there were more great chapters than okay chapters, but unfortunately most chapters are middle of the road. If that last chapter tells me anything though, is that there is hope on the horizon. With all of that in mind, Kirby Manga Mania so far gets my overall rating of a B. Thank you everybody so much for joining us on this monumental adventure. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe to see more videos like this one, and hit that bell to never miss an upload. If you want me to go over Volume 7 when it eventually comes out, put that in the comments below as well. Also, go check out the DUBASSES channel where we post comic dubs with my team of extremely talented voice actors and actresses. It's just a fun little side channel I run, so I would really appreciate it if you could go support us there as well. Join me on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for our live streams where we will be playing the following games on screen. Also join us on Friday for the next episode of the Crash Retrospective where we will be going over Crash Team Racing. I'd like to give a special shout out to Andrews Retro Games and Daniel Hawkins for being the most well-esteemed guests of them all. If you want a shout out in every video as well as early access to every video and some special emojis for our live streams, hit that join button to become a channel member. It really helps us out and allows us to make bigger and better content for you guys. We also have a merch store in the description where you can buy our mugs, shirts, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. With that, I bid you, my well-esteemed guests, adieu.